into the saying, you don't sweat when you're eating.
Call the meeting to order. Please rise for the flag salute.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Will the deputy city recorder please call roll?
Jeremy Salvage,
Here.
Kim Elfers,
Here.
Wayne Dykstra,
Here.
Dave Workman,
Here.
Michelle Steinhebel,
Here.
Carl Mann,
Here.
Rebecca Grizzle,
Here.
Tom Wells,
Here.
Josh Port, and Lance Caddy are absent.
Thank you. Are there any nominations for Budget Committee Chair?
I
Yes,
nominate
I
I'd like to
nominate Rebecca Grizzle.
Counselor. I nominate Counselor Steinable.
I nominate KJ Olfers,
We got 3 nominations
Second.
now.
but mine has a second.
So,
What are you seconding?
I see.
oh, okay.
I ain't
Motion
doing
to
it again.
nominate KJ Alfords as for Budget Committee Chair was made by Counselor Steinhebel. I always screw her name up and I apologize.
Okay.
I'm so sorry.
We'll get there.
We will. And seconded by Counselor Workman. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Nay.
Motion passes with, how many we got here?
A
4,
lot against 1.
is it 8? 7 yeas and 1 nay. Budget Committee takes over the meeting.
That's you now.
Okay. We need a nomination for a Budget Committee Secretary.
I nominate Counselor Salvage.
Second.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Those opposed?
Aye.
Doesn't do any good. So, yeah, it passes unanimously. Okay, next, we're going to look for an approval of the May 4th, 2022 Budget Committee meetings.
Move for approval.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, it passes. And are we going to do these? I've not done these before. Are we going to do these now or later?
They would be later, after we do the presentations.
Okay.
Then we would do public
Good to
comments.
go. Okay, at this point, I'm going to turn it over to the city manager for presentation of the FY 23-24 budget message.
Thank you. Good afternoon and welcome everybody to the best part of the year. I have to say that every year because it is the best part of the year. So you do have before you a proposed budget. We have made some, I think, some significant changes in the document itself this year, trying to give a lot more information about resources and uses of monies and the different funds, and trying to give more information on the services that departments provide. I will note, for the most part, we are proposing a budget that continues all of our existing services at their existing levels. There are some notable callouts. One is this budget does not include funding reopening the jail. And Chief Stevenson will be able to speak to this when he comes up if you have more specific questions. But in terms of looking at what the jail needs, we're talking at least 5 permanent staff positions, corrections officers that would staff the jail 24/7. We would have contracts for services for mental health and medical health, both of which we would be required to provide. And we have done in a very minimal basis in the past, but to meet best practices, it's about $750,000 to reopen the jail. So that's something for the committee to consider. We have included $20,000 to complete an upgrade of the city's website. It's been 8 years since we last upgraded it. We've been notified a couple of times that our site does not meet ADA requirements, and this is largely for vision impaired people, where things like when you post an image, you have to also post a description of that image. So someone who's having a reader read a website, who cannot see where it says, click here to go to the next thing, would have that read out loud and would be able to make that action. So we're looking at the need to address that upgrades both from cybersecurity and that ADA accessibility, and frankly, just a refresh on the web page. We have included another $50,000 increase in the sanitary sewer lateral budget. We have more than fully expended the budget this year. We have pulled money out of the manhole project. And Ron was in my office the other day saying we have already got people lining up for July and may very well exceed our budget even with the $50,000 increase for next fiscal year. We have included a safety coordinator position in human resources. This is to address overall safety and risk management in the organization. We've had a pretty significant increase the last couple of years in workers' comp claims, in employees being injured on the job. And we have not done a good job of record keeping in terms of trainings that we have, and I should say mandatory trainings that we have had people go through to make sure that they're doing their ladder safety training, their forklift training, those kinds of things. And frankly, everybody in the organization is stretched so thin, it's not something that we can add on to someone else's plate saying, by the way, read up on the OSHA rules, make sure you're doing your trainings and you're documenting all that. So brought in that as a position in the current year, working through using some savings from a vacant position to make that happen. We have in the Parks Fund, we've included a bump up of $20,000 for part-time summer casual. This is funded by Build Lebanon Trails, which is going to donate that money each year for the next several years, with that position really dedicated to doing maintenance along the trails. There is a huge amount of mowing and weed control and trash pickup and sweeping on those trails that needs to be done in the summertime in particular. And so BLT has agreed to fund that additional work to make sure the trails are good. In the custodial and building fund, we're adding a mechanic. We have for a number of years sent our vehicles to Benton County Public Works for maintenance. That takes the vehicle out of service for 3 or 4 hours, assuming that you can buzz over, get an oil change, and buzz back. That doesn't always happen, and Benton County's shop rate has gone up significantly the last couple of years. So we're going to add a mechanic. They will be doing the maintenance on our police vehicles, public works vehicles, our Lynx buses, engineering's vehicles, their pickups and those kinds of things. And we are seeing a reduction then in what we would be paying in that maintenance budget across those departments in the organization. And finally, the Senior Center Activities Planner was bumped from a half-time to a full-time as we continue to invest in evidence-based programming for seniors, really working to try and make sure that we are helping seniors live their best lives, to be healthy, both mentally and physically. So lots of classes on, exercise and stretching that you can do in a chair or you can do with very low impact, not suffer injuries. And then the brain side of it, crossword puzzles, games, bridge, Pinochle is back, I think. So trying to make sure that we're keeping that population going. I will note for the proposed budget in total at your place, this is a summary of the data that's in the book. It's a one-pager, and we did add the proportion of variance in terms of the current proposed budget versus the adopted budget. Our revenue projections are down pretty much across the board. Even with property taxes up, we are seeing reductions in assessments. We're seeing reductions in grant money. We don't have the federal ARPA dollars coming through. We don't budget grants generally until we receive them, so we can always do a supplemental budget in the year if we get a grant, but we don't budget assuming that we're going to get those and then appropriate and spend money potentially that we don't get. Our expenditures in total are down a little bit on the operating side with some ups, some downs by department. That's pretty normal for where we are. Again, some of that is you may have had a department that had a grant funded program this year and then doesn't have that next year, so they have that grant money removed out of their budget for next year. And so we do see some of that moving through the course of the budget. I will note the numbers in the budget message. This table got updated very last minute, so the totals in the budget message on page 7 are off by a little bit. This is the correct total budget. I think we found 1 or 2 minor things that hadn't carried through in terms of the total budget, so work off of those numbers. I will focus most of my comments here on the general fund. The general fund, as you all know, is our major operating fund that gets property tax money. It is fiscally challenged. We are having a structural problem, and I'm going to say we are not the only ones across the state of Oregon. Right now, most communities are in about the same place we are in terms of working through budget committee and city council, county commission adoption of budgets. And if you read headlines in multiple newspapers, you see Salem is looking at an $18 million deficit, Eugene at $15 million. Ontario is looking at whether or not they ought to institute fees to add a police officer. So it doesn't really matter the size. Communities are all in this place where your incoming revenue is not growing as fast as your outflow expenditures. And that mismatch for us for the proposed budget year is $1.2 million, where we are projecting to spend $1.2 million more than we're bringing in. We have fund balance. We're not at negative. We're not deficit spending. There is not a cause for severe panic. There is cause to look hard at what the future is going to be and how to best balance services in going into the future to try and keep within our resource, our revenue stream on an annualized basis. And I note that can be done in several ways, right? You can cut the budget, you can seek new revenues in a variety of ways, you can do a combination of those. That's going to be some work we're going to ask the council to take up over the coming year. I will also note that for the first time, we have a 5-year financial plan that is in the budget. This is on page 13. This is for the general fund. We're hoping to be able to add other major funds. This really does try and project out where we are today, and if our current trends continue into the future, where we would be in the next 5 years. Now, I'm the first person to tell you that by definition, the budget's plan, the plan never goes according to plan. So I can tell you that bottom line, the numbers will not be what we are projecting, right? We will have years over those 5 years where we'll have some years where revenues are higher than expected and some years where they're lower. We'll have years where we don't spend the full budget, maybe by a significant share. So for example, the current year with the police department vacancies that we have had, the police department budget will be considerably underexpended. But we're getting very close to the police department once again being fully staffed. And I would not predict that we would underexpend to that level. I would hope we would not underexpend to that level next year. So we see those waves coming through the budget. What we do is try to put together a snapshot that lets us say, what actions can we take today that will make our financial situation look better in the long term? To that end, staff made some cuts in the budgets in there from what they originally asked for to what is in the document before you. The cuts that we've made are largely materials and supplies, some contracts, some capital outlay. Those are not going to be sustainable in terms of maintaining our current operations. So we can cut training back for a year in a department, but sooner or later, certification requires that those trainings be brought back to the fore. We can cut our computer replacement budget for a little bit, for a year, but those computers will begin to fail, upgrades will have to happen, or else our system fails. So we recognize that a lot of what has been cut to get us to this point for this year is kind of a one-time basis and will require more work on an ongoing basis to take this community forward in time. I would say I would like to be able to see our revenues grow. We are still almost 10 years from when we will make our final debt payment on the Northwest Urban Renewal District, and that district would, that value would roll back onto the tax rolls. I would hope that we could do it sooner than that, but you do have to make all the debt payment commitments that you have, and we are working through that. I also will note that we continue to try and invest in infrastructure, and you see that around the community, but that is largely being done with water and sewer rate revenue, right? It's the monthly utility bills. So as you've heard Ron talk about West Side Interceptor, that's funded by the wastewater fund. It's not funded by the general fund. So that work continues because that fund, we're able to set rates and raise the revenue we need, but it's not going to help us in the general fund where we can't raise those rates at this point. For the future, again, I think the general fund is the largest area of concern. I think we recognize the need for additional police officers. We would like to be able to reopen the jail. That's going to be a heavy lift. I think the senior center needs to have at least one more activities planner offering services in the post-COVID environment. We are seeing more and more people using that facility as they feel safe to do. We don't have a public information officer. We don't have a disaster management planner. Both of those are positions I think are important. And both of those positions would function in part internally within the organization, but also in part with communications with the community. There is a lot to be said for a disaster management planner doing community trainings based on what should you be prepared for, how do you pack a go bag, what should be in those go bags, how do you know who's in your neighborhood, and when the big one hits or the flood hits or the fire hits, who do you need to make sure is okay? You know, were you able to get out of the house? Are you safe? Where do we have vulnerable members that are in my block that I can watch out for? I will tell you that our Parks Department is understaffed. I know a lot of you use the trails. When you walk along those trails, pay attention to how much space there is on both sides of those trails that need to be mowed, need to be weeded, need to be attended to, maintained, cleaned. In addition to all of our parks and our sports fields and maintaining all of those, there's a lot of work that is done by Public Works on a routine basis. And Jason and his crews make a good job of kind of moving people where the highest demand is at any given time. But we do need to invest more in our parks maintenance and our facilities there, particularly as we see the Cheetah Lake project coming forward in the next couple of years and expansions and expanded use of that park. Expanded use will mean expanded maintenance also. I note that we continue to have no resources to fix local streets. What we get from the state every year in gas tax money is not enough. We do street projects as we can. So again, with Ron, you've heard a lot of discussion about the 7th Street water line that's become water line, sewer line, stormwater line, and street. So that will address that section of 7th Street. But again, you all know driving around town, our residential streets are in bad shape, and we don't have money coming in for that. We continue to see decreases in state gas tax money as more people switch to EVs or as gas mileage is going up, and we see the state trying to figure out how they're going to manage both the demand that ODOT has for needing more resources and the demand that cities and counties have in terms of how we get resources to maintain our local streets. That is coming conversation at the state level, but it also needs to be a conversation at the local level, because I don't believe the state is going to come with money that says, you know, here's enough that you can replace or repair 10 blocks of local streets every year that you know every community has a need for. I know we're completing the wastewater treatment plant master plan. That should be coming to the council for review later this summer or early fall. I think we have every expectation that that is going to lay out a series of needed improvements at the wastewater treatment plant that are going to be costly. As we watch our neighbor's Sweet Home that's gone from a $20 million plant to a $40 million plant to a $55 million plant, same plant, just the cost driving up those needs. That's going to put more pressure on our wastewater rates in terms of the need to fund those services and meet the requirements. I'll tell you, we're watching at the federal level as the federal government looks at per and polyfluorinated substances, PFASs. You'll hear a lot more about this, I'm pretty sure, over the coming years, that are in drinking water or not in drinking water. We aren't really sure. But there is a movement to require local water service providers to treat for PFASs and to make sure those are not in your water. And if we have them in our water, that will be expansion of some kind likely at the water treatment plant. I'll tell you, I'm hoping for federal money to come in and pay for that as they drive that, because they certainly recognize that there is a significant need for communities to address their water infrastructure. But I can't hold my breath anymore that the federal government is going to fund what the federal government requires us to do. So we're watching it. We're starting to look at what that might involve. I note that we are likely to reach a population of 20,000 this year or next year. We'll see those numbers come out in December from Portland State University. All kinds of things are happening as we switch into that. We're no longer considered a rural community. That moves us out of a pot of rural grants that was pretty easy to get. Just call up and say, hey, we need some money for this thing. And you'd have a couple people at the state say, yeah, let's help you as a rural community. You need that help. At even our current population, they kind of say, yeah, you can do that on your own. And the grants get more complex. They get bigger, they have more strings attached to them, they need more work to apply for them, more work to manage them as we go forward in time. But I always like being able to get a grant to fund a significant project that the community needs, because we have such a hard time raising that money locally. I also will say that that starts adding more responsibilities. To some extent, you all are seeing that. The council is seeing that as we work through things like the housing production strategy. Bills that are moving in the current legislative session are moving that to a state coming in and telling you, if you're over 10,000, here's what you have to do on housing development to get more affordable housing, more housing in total built in the community. We're going to continue to see those things drive as the state says, if you're over 10,000, we'll have another jump when we get to 25,000, which is a couple of years off, but maybe not that far. And so I think those are going to put pressures on us and our ability to provide services to the community and continue to do that and maintain everything else that we're doing. I'm going to close by saying I appreciate the work that staff does every year in terms of pulling the budget together for us. We spent a lot of time working on this, and I appreciate Brandon and his group. I think Brandon did a good job of bringing more information into the budget about what we do and why we do it, where the revenue comes from, the assumptions that we're making about what's happening with those revenues, and being clear with those assumptions to say, assumptions that prove to be wrong, give us some opportunity to make amendments going forward. So with that, I'm going to stop and answer questions, if there are any.
Are there any questions?
I'm just curious, how many, do we know how many are in our fleet of city vehicles? I should probably know that, but I don't know how many there is.
And I think it's a lot. I think I'm looking up at Jason's got $1 billion, 25. Oh, 75 total. Okay.
Thank you.
So that, you have to think about that includes mowers and
That's everything.
what is that? The sheep's foot that tromps down gravel things. So we've got a lot of kind of peculiar machines in addition to vehicles. Things like the Vactors, the street sweepers require a lot of attention.
Any other questions for Nancy? Okay, let's go on to the presentation of department budgets. Nancy?
Okay, so we're going to have directors come up and we're going to try and do this in a timely way. So we're going to start with Kendra Antilla, our library director. Frank Stevenson will come up because he's next up. They're going to give you, and as we go through this, you're going to get 4 to 6 minutes, 5 minutes-ish presentation, highlights of the budget, and then have the opportunity to ask questions. And getting any other information that you need or would like to have from a department director.
All right. Okay, here we go. Good afternoon, everyone. If you've heard me talk about the library ever, you've heard me say that we are more than books. It always amazes me that people who are not library users have no idea that we also have movies, music, audiobooks, magazines, newspapers. We have a library of things, almost exclusively grant funded. In that collection, our patrons can check out things like a microscope, a telescope, a sewing machine, electronic drum, keyboard, specialty cake pans, a bird watching kit, engineering and robotics kits, a toy cash register for kids to learn about money, a puppet theater, board games. We also have a seed library. That's all donated seeds from wholesalers where patrons can check out a variety of seeds. Between the physical and digital items in our collection, we check out roughly 150,000 items annually. We also have public computers. We have Wi-Fi, blazing fast Wi-Fi inside the building and outside the building. It's important to remember that in-home internet is a luxury not everyone can afford, and or if you're in a rural area, it's just not possible. So if you notice in the budget report, I did there's an impact report graphic. We had over 75,000 Wi-Fi connections in the past year and close to 11,000 internet uses of our in-house computers. We also have study rooms that are constantly busy. There's only 3 of them, but they're heavily used by the public for tutoring, for job interviews, for Zoom meetings, for supervised visitation even. They get a lot of use for a lot of different things. We are also part of the Lynn Library Consortium. That is a reciprocal agreement between Albany, Sweet Home, SCIO, Harrisburg, and Lebanon Public Libraries, as well as Lynn Benton Community College. We started that consortium in 2017. That allows my patrons, Lebanon patrons, can check out items from any of those libraries at no cost to them. They can choose to have it delivered to the Lebanon Library via courier, or they can go to any of those libraries and use their Lebanon card at those libraries. The only cost involved is the cost for the courier. That cost me about $2,000 a year. And Lebanon patrons checked out close to $90,000 worth of materials from those other libraries in just the past year. And a big part of what we do is programming. Programming is huge. We do story times, of course. Early literacy is crucial, and we all benefit from a more literate society. We have preschool and baby story times. There have been 59 story times since September. We do summer reading, and then we start up again with story times in September. So since September, there have been 59 story times. The average attendance is 44 people at those story times. We also have adult book club, we have game night, we have SUGO, which stands for Show Up, Geek Out. That's STEM programming for children. We have a teen advisory group that plans all kinds of teen activities. We do huge public events during spring break and summer reading. And we do often just sporadic story events for other things. We recently had the Audubon Society come out and do a bird talk, and then they took people outside, gave them binoculars and showed them a bunch of cool things. We do family game nights. We recently did one where they did a Nerf. We handed out Nerf guns and safety glasses to everyone, and they played capture the flag. And then candy bar bingo. We recently had Star Wars night on May the 4th. We had 305 attendees at that event. Family events, free, fun, safe family programming is a huge deal, and it's something that we offer to the public. And anytime we do, we just have massive turnouts for things like that. All programming is free. It's open to everyone. No library card is required. And that's a little summation of what we do.
Okay, thank you. Any questions from anybody? Nothing. Okay, thank you, ma'am.
Thanks.
We're going to have Frank up next.
Good afternoon, everyone. How's everyone doing? Can I get over?
Peachy.
I'm doing great, thanks. I believe our budget for the police department's on page 45, in case you guys needed to reference that. Just a quick synopsis of what the police department consists of. We 42 budgeted for full-time employees. We've, as suggested or as stated, the jail is the number one topic right now, is how are you going to reopen that and how are you going to fund that? That's kind of a pretty big deal. And it's something that's going to be a heavy lift in the coming years to figure out how we are going to make that happen. I've included in the presentation for you guys to review is just a few graphs. And rather than going over all those graphs, I figured I would just leave it up to you guys if you had any questions in regards to that. But one in particular to pay attention to is just the rise in population and the decrease in the number of officers. Also, another one is the use of force. You'll see that the use of force is definitely on the uptick and on the uprise, with the number of officers decreasing. Some highlights as far as something that, as you guys are very much aware of, we've been short-staffed over the last year and a half. I'm happy to say, though, to report to you that we've hired 7 since the beginning of the year. It says 6 in here, but I just hired another one last week. So we're definitely on the uptick on getting us back to fully staffed. I have 2 remaining that are in backgrounds right now. If we get those through backgrounds and psychs and everything, we'll be back to fully staffed. So that's something that I made a goal, or me and my administration made a goal within a year to get us back to fully staffed, and we're reaching that goal. So there's a lot to say, but I don't know what kind of questions you guys have, so I'm just going to leave it up to you guys.
Well, I have a question. It's more for maybe directed at Nancy. On these, when there's the variance on the right side there for police, it's 4.2. Is that to address in just the economic inflationary period we're in, or how do you describe that?
Okay, so as we noted, we have 2 labor units: American Federation of State, County, Municipal Employees, which is our general service unit; Teamsters, which is everybody except the 4 management positions in the police department. So records, evidence, all of the police officers, sergeants. Those units have labor agreements. In the case of the police department, they have an existing agreement that doesn't expire until June 30th of 24. And that agreement sets out what their cost of living adjustments are. So they're getting, everyone in the unit is getting a 4% COLA, and then we have a 1%, I'm going to make sure I'm doing this right, a 1% market adjustment for officers and sergeants who, in our last negotiations, were behind market. Any officer, and with 7 new officers coming on board, hopefully soon to be 9, they start at step 1 on the pay scale, but then they get step increases at 6 months. I don't remember now the timing. So they might get an additional 5% step increase. And with more young officers on payroll, we've got more officers getting that step increase. I think police kept their materials and services budget relatively flat, but like everybody else, we are seeing cost increases that are general cost increases, but I think the staffing costs are a big issue at the police department. think it's important to remember we're a service organization and that's people. And it does cost to have people and to have the, you know, the salaries, the benefits, all of that.
And then this is for the chief, and I probably know this, but DHS, is that, what's the acronym stand for?
Department of Human Services. So it's yeah, DHS.
I was thinking
referrals.
Homeland Security for a second. I was like, no, that can't be it. So, okay.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, you'll see in the graphs and such that the number of calls kind of have remained the same, increased a little bit, but the nature of the calls that we're dealing with in regards to what we used to deal with have become a lot more complex. With DHS referrals, that's child welfare but more seriousness crimes that we're investigating, mental health aspect, of course, the houselessness. So a lot of these components are taking up a lot of majority of our time, leaving us to, unfortunately, is we're a reactive department, and that's something that Lebanon Police Department in a whole has never, we've always prided ourselves on being proactive. These last couple years, we've been slowly going into just the reactive side of things, and that's just due to the amount of officers that we have lost and just the lack of resources that we've had available to us. Yeah, one thing I found interesting is the national average, and I put that in there just for you guys to review. It shows that a national average is what, 2.2 per 1,000, 2.2 officers per 1,000. Right now, if I was fully staffed, that leaves us with 1.6. So we're below average. And I take that 26 number, and that includes myself. That includes all of my administrative staff and detectives. You take them out of the mix, that leaves us with 19 patrol. That leaves us below 1. So we're like a point. I'm not a mathematician, but if I was to do it, it definitely is below 1% or 1 per 1,000 population. So definitely are way below national average. And as we're seeing within the city, the livability issues, and that's strictly what we deal with. The thefts are increasing, burglaries are increasing, stolen cars are increasing, and that goes along with not enough there to react to what's going on out there.
I had a question. I understand the 2.2 and 1.6, and when you strip out the overhead folks, it's like 0.8.
Yeah.
How does that compare with the rest of the valley? I mean, we can't be the only ones that are suffering this.
I don't think we're the only ones suffering this. I think we're definitely one that are this low, for sure.
I would note some of the rest of the valley communities have put in place fees on utility bills, and they are paying for police officers with that, or they have a local option levy that is funding police
Right.
officers. And those two solutions seem to be what a lot of communities are doing to try and increase their public safety staffing. I also will note that with the increased complexity of the calls that the police department is going on, it becomes critical to have more than one officer responding. One officer pulls you over to give you a speeding ticket, but if you're on a domestic, if you're working on livability issue, you've got mental health issues, you need at least 2 officers, and sometimes you need 4 to make sure that the person you're working with is safe and your officers are safe. And I think that is driving the need for more officers in all communities. And we're not alone in dealing with these challenges and the continued lack of mental health resources. That is a challenge for everybody in the state of Oregon right now.
Right. I'm just wondering if we're facing this alone or how other people are handling this situation. Just food for thought what we might do.
Yeah, I mean, there's always, I meet with other local jurisdictions on a bi-monthly basis, and I mean, they're facing some of the same challenges we are when it comes to mental health and
Sure.
lack of resources, like every other agency is.
Yep.
And I'm not saying that we're the only one, but I think it's imperative to understand that we are pretty much the only one that's this low. And I think that's something that, is something that we all need to understand. And then there needs to come to a point where everything that the Lebanon Police Department's known for, community policing, outreach, proactivity, things of that nature, is slowly being diminished, slowly going away, because I don't have the resources, simply put, to address those. I have to respond to calls. That's the number one priority.
Right. Well, you haven't had the resources for a while.
No, I mean, and just to mention, yes, I have hired people, but it's going to take them probably another 18 months before they're legitimately out on their own and being productive members of the police department. Not saying they're not productive now or appreciated, but right now they're just being trained. So, and that's just the process that we have to go through.
Right. There's no quick fix to this.
No, it's been a slow and steady climb. I mean, we're getting there, and we're seeing the light at the end of the tunnel. I wish the light was a lot brighter, but it is what it is. But we're getting there.
Good.
Right. Excuse me, have we had the discussion about introducing a levy to address the jail?
We have not, but that is something that I think is in the future to discuss, is something, a local levy to address just the jail. I don't necessarily want it to be a police
Operational,
operational,
but if it could address that piece, it would address some of the other issues by default that
100% agree, yeah. If we can open up the jail and be able to house individuals and hold them accountable for committing some of the local thefts and things of that nature, I mean, you can see in the graphs kind of where the crime was starting to come down, our jail was open.
Right.
The traffic offenses were going down because I had people out there dedicated to traffic. So you can see when things are in place and operating as they should be, crime rate goes down, things go down, we're being more proactive. So in regards to the jail, absolutely. If we were able to somehow find a way to fund the jail the way that it needs to be funded and have dedicated employees just strictly for the jail, that would definitely start seeing a decrease in livability issue, thefts and things of that nature, because we'd be able to hold people accountable.
Well,
That
I
was a
think-
long-winded answer, wasn't it?
that was really long.
Kept her from talking.
I can keep going.
No, I think that the community of Lebanon is largely supportive of the police department, and I think that would be something worthy of exploring. And because we do have high expectations of you, because we have a good history of response and of service from the Lebanon Police Department. But that, I mean, having been part of that jail decision and seeing the impact on the city, I think it really behooves us to painfully explore how to get that back open.
Yeah, and I fully agree with
It's-
you.
I'm not very good at math or algebra, but is there a way to quantify what it costs us to not have a jail? Is there any
Well, you can
variables we can
see
put together to get an idea of that?
what it costs not to have a jail.
Yeah.
Well, you can see in the budget, the cuts that have been made. Again, you're talking $750,000 roughly for personnel and medical, so there's
I just mean what's it costing
$750,000.
us? If we had a jail,
Uh-huh.
what cost would we be eliminating? Is there a way to quantify that? I mean, or is that
Well,
just algebra?
yeah, that's your algebra thing. We still have, I mean, yeah, you could take materials and services, which is roughly about $50,000. So, but I don't think you can put a price on safety, and I don't
No,
think you can
what I'm
definitely
saying
put a
is,
price
would we
on.
be safer? How would we be safer in Lebanon if we had a jail right now?
How would we be safe? We'd be able to put people in jail.
I get it. But I think that's something we have
Hold
to
people
look at.
accountable.
Instead of the heavy lifting of the cost of having to have a jail, what's it costing us to not have a jail that serves us? I can see the difference. So I guess kind of rhetorical question, but I agree. We need to explore that and find a way that that's a priority and not just brush that off.
Yeah.
I think where he's going is, how many fewer larcenies would we have? How many fewer?
Correct.
I see what you're saying.
Yeah.
Would we have? And we could probably figure that within reason based on prior statistics when
Yeah.
it was open.
And that's some of the things, like, again, some of the graphs will show kind of a decrease. When we had the jail open, we definitely had a decrease in the amount of thefts and larceny and kind of the livability issues, the low-level crimes, misdemeanor offenses that were going on. So, because they didn't want to go to Lebanon jail, they didn't want to go to jail. So, and we were able to hold them accountable. But without that useful tool, and Lebanon is extremely unique. We're one of the very few municipalities that has the capability and has a jail. And Lebanon's jail is by far one of the best jails in the state, far as municipality wise goes. If you've gone around and toured other ones, we have the most state-of-the-art equipment, and I mean, it's set up perfectly if we only had the personnel to run it. So
So it also help with the homeless. I'm just want to be on record that I support, it might be a heavy lift, but I'm behind lifting it if we can.
yeah, I'm sorry, I did, yeah, I agree.
He'll support you too.
I support
I figured you
too.
would.
Yeah, absolutely.
Chief, you'd said we're you've hired 7 officers with your recent hire. Where does that put it? Is that 7th position fully staffed as far as sworn officers?
No, I would need 2 more, and then I'll be fully staffed.
Does
So,
does the budget for 23, 24 account for 2 more?
yes, yeah, that will
The
bring
budget
me-
will give us a fully staffed police department.
Right, yeah, that will give me 42 total
Okay.
employees,
Okay.
correct, yeah.
Okay.
I have a question. So actually 2 questions. First, looking at the types of crimes per year, I see narcotics is down. This is kind of a leading question, but is that due to Measure 110?
That is a 100% reflection of Measure 110. Where drugs and narcotics are very prevalent in our community, there's not a lot that we can do with that. It basically is not a crime. You get a citation that you don't have to appear in and don't have to pay for. So yes, to answer the question, it's gone down because it's basically no longer criminalized,
Okay,
which is a very sad thing.
I agree.
Agreed.
The second question is, looking at the types of crimes, I guess it says mental, and that clearly has like a pretty huge spike there. It looks like almost 200. How are the police officers equipped to deal or to work through a mental health call? Especially now that we're going to have, 7 new people. I just want to make sure that they're receiving what they need to answer those particularly challenging calls, I imagine.
Yeah, so there is training that's out there available that we try to send the officers to try to equip them with the most tools that they can have when it comes to dealing with mental health. But no matter how much training that we provide them, they're still not going to be that individual, or they're not going to have the expertise to do so. But we do train them to the best we can. And you'll notice also within there was materials and services under training. We did have to reduce some of that training that is specialized. That's specialized. What we consider specialized training is mental health, dealing with the mentally health individuals. So we're going to have to figure out other ways and other avenues. We do rely heavily on Lane County mental health. So they do offer some trainings, and they do have outreach. But unfortunately, like the rest of society, they had a hard time trying to fill positions and trying to get people up and trained and trying to get an outreach team together. There's very few and far between. They're servicing Lane County, and there's, I think, 4 of them. So,
Wow.
yeah.
I'd like to come back and ask Chief. I thought Counselor Steinhable asked a really good question about narcotics arrests. The flip side of that, ballpark increased use of Narcan,
Oh,
because I know that has been and is an ongoing issue.
yeah. Narcan is, I don't know if you guys are familiar with what Narcan does. Okay. But yeah, we've definitely, since Measure 110 has passed, we've had a very steady increase on the usage of officers responding to individuals who are unresponsive, overdosing, and have increased our usage of using Narcan. So, And that's, it's not uncommon for, it's a weekly occurrence.
That's
We
nasal spray. I assume it's the nasal spray.
Yeah,
Narcan.
it's
Okay.
nasal spray.
Do
And
we incur that cost then as,
right now we don't. It's kind of paid for already, but
nice.
there's going to come a time when that's also going to be something that we need to budget in. So increase in drug use, increase to that overdoses. So.
I know we see them, the police come by the soup kitchen probably once a week. 'Cause we get the mentally unstable individuals every day. And watching them, you could tell they're trained, and basically about all they can do really is de-escalate the folks and kind of move them along. There's not a lot of options unless they act out. And I know we've started the Narcan, thanks to the police, over at the soup kitchen. And we've had to use it over there. As they come in for meals, we get the same thing. And it's a lot more common. It's a shame that my cooks have to learn how to be lifesavers. But that's the reality of where we're at.
Yeah.
well, I'm just going to add that I just want to say thank you to you and the police department, especially the admin team, of course, the officers as well. But I know over this last year, things have been challenging, and you've had to fill in for doing patrol, and as well as the other, like the lieutenants and certainly Captain Hyde. Even just the other night, we had a very busy council meeting, and I saw the 2 lieutenants here. So just thank you for your persistence and in trying to get us fully staffed. So thank you.
I appreciate it. Yeah,
Hang in there.
It's definitely been
We had a call with you this morning and you were right there at Linco. Thank you.
Well, I wasn't, but I would have been, but I wasn't.
Well, I will
Wasn't
say,
me.
if you call them, if you call them with a stolen vehicle at shift change, you'll get a real good response. And you'll get the chief calling you from around the corner. Hey, where are you at? So.
Yeah, I have to say, and this is probably in my career, this past year and a half has probably been one of the most challenging that I've ever faced. Not only looking at it from a patrol officer's perspective, but also from my own chief's perspective. It has been extremely challenging with low staffing levels, and but the men and women of your police department, and they're doing an exceptional job with what they have up in front of them and what they're dealing with. Sometimes just 2 of them out there patrolling the city with 19,976 population. I think that's the number. But to say that it's definitely been a challenge. So, but they're doing an exceptional job.
Okay, any other questions? Well, I will make my pitch again, like I do almost every meeting. Go out and get with chief and go out and ride. Go see what they do in person. You'd just be amazed at the stuff that they flip from switch to switch when the calls come in. Thanks, Frank.
You bet.
Okay, next would be Senior Center, Kendra Oliver.
Good afternoon. I guess I'll start with the senior center. It's on page 48 if you wanted to follow along. Just hit some highlights here. We have 2.25 FTE in the senior center budget. It's 0.75 for the director position. And actually a good chunk of that is used for match for the Links Transit program for one of our federal grants. We have a full-time activities coordinator position, which Nancy spoke of earlier. And then we also have a 0.5 shared position. It's a full-time position, but 0.5 is in the senior center and 0.5 is in the transit fund. And that's for a coordinator position that helps kind of see daily operations for both departments. A couple of highlights. This coming fiscal year in the budget, there is $25,000 in revenue for 2 Older Americans Act funds grants. One is for $15,000 for the evidence-based programs that Nancy touched on earlier. It's research-based that if seniors come partake 2 to 3 times a week for 45 to 60 minutes of exercise, for 8 to 12 weeks. Research shows that they have increased mobility, increased muscle strength, greater balance, and so on. We did have a grant for evidence-based programs this fiscal year, this current year. We received $8,500. To date, we have implemented 2 classes, and we're kicking off a 3rd evidence-based program in June. It's a Walk With Ease program. It's been very successful. So we were very pleased that when we applied for these grants for next fiscal year, that they gave us a little bit of a bump in funding. So we'll be looking at other programs that we can offer as well. We also received a grant for $10,000 for an iPad purchase through Older Americans Act funds. This is to help address loneliness and combat isolation, help keep seniors in touch with family through Facebook, Zoom, email, whatever the case may be. So we have some plans to put that grant to good use. As a result, you will see a slight increase in materials and services, which is directly related to receiving these funds. It's about $20,000 in materials and services. And then the other $5,000 that we'll be receiving will go toward helping offset staff time for instructing those classes. Nancy also touched that we're, getting closer to our pre-COVID numbers. One thing I like to say is, when people think of senior centers, they think, oh, yeah, people come to play bingo. That's a lot of fun. But we are more than bingo. We do put a lot of thought into our programming. We actually have 7 focus areas, and we try to offer a wide array of programming. Again, Nancy touched on some of those things we do. We put our newsletter out there on Facebook and on our city website. I could go on and on and on about the programming, but I'll try to work through all the information. Cascades West Council of Governments uses our space in the senior center. We have a large kitchen area. This year, they will provide almost 40,000 meals to seniors in our community. That's both in-house. We have a meal site at the senior center, and they also deliver Meals on Wheels. And that's about just over 160 meals each weekday that they're providing. I have a couple pages of unsolicited testimonials. I'll spare you on that as well. I'm happy to share it with Nancy and can push it out, but really, a lot of great things that our senior center staff and Link staff are doing, making some invaluable connections and helping people age healthy and live independently as long as they possibly can. Our staff's doing some great stuff. But again, I can share that with Nancy so you guys can see some of the things that people have said. Some of it's really tugs at your heartstrings. So with that, I can move on to transit if you'd like, unless somebody has specific questions about the senior center.
Just don't diss bingo. Come on.
Right. No.
Saying.
So we were meeting in our heritage room, and we actually had to move it down into our auditorium
Yeah.
because the group has gotten so large. You can't get around with the walkers and wheelchairs. So at any rate, we just did that a few weeks ago. So yes,
Just don't diss the bingo. I'll
bingo
get in
is
trouble.
fun. It is. Okay, so we'll move on to transit. Pages 86 and 87. A couple of highlights that I'll mention. I think I did include this in a manager report, but I'll go ahead and mention it again. Every 3-4 years, each transit provider in the state of Oregon is required to go through an audit with ODOT. So it's a complimentary audit just to make sure that we're in compliance with everything. We have a lot of policies in place, and things are ever changing. So ODOT and their consultants came down to take a look at our operations. They looked at our ADA policy and operations. They looked at our operations manual. They looked at our Title VI policies, which includes, LEP. They looked at our financial policies. Brandon helped out with that a bit. Looked at our procurement policy, some of our recent purchases, vehicle maintenance, and they only had a few recommendations for us to make. And our regional transit coordinator at ODOT at the time said that was the fewest number of recommendations that they had ever seen as they had been going through other audit processes. So we are pretty pleased with that. Another highlight, we have a new low, no emissions fleet transition plan. We did apply for funding for an electric van. Of course, Oregon, and you'll see this, across the nation where, we're trying to reduce carbon emissions. So we do have a plan in place. It doesn't mean with each and every new bus that we're purchasing, it's going to be an electric vehicle. We have one van and we have 8 cutaway vehicles. The cutaway vehicles are more difficult to find in an electric form. So as they become more available, as funding is available, that will be a priority for us. At any rate, we do have that plan. It was a requirement for applying for that grant. Couple other highlights, and I'm sure you've read this in department manager reports. Last fiscal year, we were just over 30,000 rides, which was a 36% increase over any other fiscal year. This fiscal year, we will probably hit the 48,000 ride mark, which is a 59% increase over last fiscal year. Crazy. So, part of that is because we started the Brownsville connector last June. That service runs 2 days a week, runs 5 loops to Brownsville and back. It has been well received. The numbers are growing. We're getting regular riders from Brownsville. It's a great service. It's something that the Lynn County Transit Advisory Committee has talked about for a number of years. It's filling in the gaps, an unmet need in our community. So it's going very well. We are also still not charging fares, and that's something that a lot of transit providers have been doing since COVID hit. We stopped collecting fares and passes just because of COVID, and a lot of the providers have still just kind of hung on to that. As a matter of fact, Albany just announced a week and a half ago that they're not going to reinstate collecting fares. Our thought behind this, and with talking with Nancy and ODOT, is we will revisit the fare structure when we look at expanding our loop service. That's our deviated fixed route service. Right now, we have a loop service that runs through town. It stops at Walmart and Safeway and has 7 stops in town. We do 9 loops a day. That's our most efficient mode of service. Our other service is demand response, and we have 4 or 5 vehicles out every day picking people up, going to their homes. Of course, we do group people and get them to medical appointments or shopping. But again, the deviated fixed route is our most efficient mode of service. So it just kind of makes sense, if we were to expand that service, maybe have an east and a west loop, then the demand on demand response would go down a little bit. At any rate, that's when we'll look at that fare structure to see what makes the most sense, and if we want to reinstate it or what we want to do there. Regarding budget for transit, you'll see things, revenue side and obviously expense side are a little bit higher. We have quite a few capital purchases and a larger capital project in our budget this year. Just kind of looking at revenue, I thought maybe it would be helpful to do just a bit of a breakdown to see, between federal and state grants, what that funding is comprised of. About 187,000 are federal grants for operations. That includes our 5311 grant, CARES Act fund, some funding to address COVID-19. We have $848,000 for operations. All of this funding is through the statewide transportation improvement fund. That is House Bill 2017, which when they implemented the 0.01% payroll tax for anybody who works in the state of Oregon, and it was designated specifically for new and enhanced transportation service. It couldn't, take over anything that we were doing previously. So 677,000 of that is for our loop deviated fixed route, our Saturday service, our expanded hours, are serving up to 5 miles outside city limits, which includes the communities of Waterloo, Sotaville, and Crabtree. It includes $102,000 for serving outlying communities, and that was when I spoke to the Brownsville connector piece. That's what that is slated for. And then there's $69,000 for operations, and that's the population based piece of the statewide transportation improvement funds. It's kind of a mouthful. $20,000 as a federal grant for preventive maintenance for our vehicles. $490,000 in federal grants for capital purchases, which includes an electric van, a cutaway vehicle, some dispatching software, and improvements to our Park and Oak stop, the bus stop that we share with the Lynch shuttle. I'll stop.
Let's pause for the
Okay.
train. They knew we were here, so they came by.
Eight.
What's a real train this time?
Steamer to come by next, add a little flavor to it,
A little nostalgia.
like we're at Petticoat Junction.
This one's a real train. I'm used to them having 3 cars. Okay, all right, let's pick it
right.
up again. Thank
Okay.
you for the pause.
Of course. In revenue, just a couple more things to mention. $426,000 in statewide transportation improvement fund discretionary grants. So that was a competitive process anybody in Oregon wanted to apply for. And that is for improvements, actually to be moving our fleet to the maintenance shops. We're currently at the police department, the Justice Center parking lot. We've been outgrowing that space for some time, and certainly the police department could use the space that we've been utilizing since they opened up. So that will provide funding for site work, paving, shop door, pit work for working on the vehicles, and conduit for a future phase 2 at some point in time when we're looking at electrifying, starting that process to electrify our fleet. We'll have the conduit in place to make that happen. It also includes $136,000 in, again, statewide transportation improvement funds for match for that secure parking and also match for the dispatch software. And just a side note there, we do have a meeting on June 1st with the Lynn County Transportation Advisory Committee. And they will be reviewing and approving allocations for all providers in Lynn County. So that $136,000 in this budget, we're hopefully going to get that approved on June 1st. So, and then of course, just kind of going through all the revenue, kind of makes sense what's going to be on the expense side of things for some of those capital projects. And that kind of wraps it up for transit. I don't know if anybody has any questions.
Any questions about transit? I know it's a breathtaking endeavor.
I do have one.
Sure.
So a lot of grant money's coming in and has been coming in since 21.
Mhm.
How much of that do we rely on to actually operate, and how much of it is just like expanding what we have already? Like if next year we have 0 grant money, or what's the situation then?
So the really nice thing is that the statewide transportation improvement funds are relatively stable. Of course, what does that mean? There's never any guarantee, of course. When I was kind of breaking down those funds, the federal funds, I'm going off the top of my head now because I have a million papers here, but
Yeah.
5311 funding, we've had that funding in place since I started with the city back in 2003, 2004. That funding is allocated each year. I believe there are 35 providers. It's for rural transportation. So ODOT gets an allocation each year, and then they look at number of rides, number of miles, and then they put those numbers in there, and then they determine who gets what
Okay.
allocated.
So it's a pretty stable funding source that we can almost count on every year, or at least.
It
plan.
is.
Almost.
Almost.
And given our increase in ridership and revenue miles and revenue hours, that funding, I mean, it should go up.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
I have a question, and maybe you're the one to answer it. I'm not sure. But you just said something, rural.
I have the same question, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, if we break 20,000,
Oh,
certain things change.
not.
Does,
So
but I know they don't change in every single
That's
category.
correct.
So does it
50,000.
affect you like it would affect over here?
For transportation,
Right.
it's 50,000 when you become then a metropolitan planning organization.
Okay.
Right? And then you move out of 5311 to 5310.
So we have a little bit of a buffer.
We got years.
Mouth of
We're
God's
probably good.
ears.
Yeah, a lot of you guys won't be around. I attended a county commission meeting where you guys were talking about riders per, I mean, there's a measurement for different systems. Can you like address that just in a brief?
Sure. Well, we have different performance measures. So, there's cost per mile, there's cost per revenue hour, there's cost per ride. For example, and I do have them broken out between our loop system, our demand response system, and our Brownsville connector system. So if you're looking at Brownsville connector, I mean, average trip is 13, 14 miles. So, those trips are more expensive. And then you look at our other systems, and the deviated fixed route comes in a little bit less than our demand response. But, it is $18, $19, $20, $22 per ride. That's the actual cost, all in for providing transportation.
But that seems, I mean, it seems like a lot, but it
does.
seemed like there were a lot of systems that were
Our drivers, they are so personable, so friendly, and genuinely care about the people that we're serving. And I just feel so good
Yep.
about that. They do a fabulous job.
They come by the soup kitchen every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, just like clockwork, because we have the
They do.
same folks. They know who to pick up, know where to take them, know how to pick them up, because everybody has a little different need, and it's wonderful.
Yeah.
It's a great
Great.
service.
Thanks for saying
So
so.
thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, we want to get into, yeah.
I just got notified that our audio.
Okay, why don't we take a 10-minute break? Let Brent get a hold of our. Do it.
Deal.
Oh my God, that.
My back hurts.
I jumped out of too many airplanes and I have bone on bone, so, yeah, not a fun thing.
You're doing good, KJ.
Riveting. So excited.
I got one of those weird freaking. So I just, brought it up, I help desk. some young Christian Oriental gal wanted to fall in love with him. Like, what? City? It's like, don't know who, don't want to know who. And your guy sent back the next day, locked it. You're good. Thanks for letting us know. Oh, yeah. Yeah, I don't get too many of them anymore. I did it first. Over. But I got so much stuff that goes straight to my stomach.
What's going on with it?
I don't like people.
That one there? That one there, I just pulled up on it. Okay. Yeah, the
I am told we're back on the air. Okay, good to go. All right, next will be community development. Kelly Hart.
Hi, everybody.
Thank you, Kelly.
Thank you. So I'm the Community Development Director, obviously. The Community Development Department is made up of 3 different divisions, the Planning, Building, and Economic Development Division. In total, the budget for the department is just over $1 million, distributed over 4 different funds. And the vast majority of the budget is associated with salaries and benefits for the employees. And so we have 4 full-time employees, including myself, within the department. And as part of our building division, we contract with a building official for building official duties and inspection services. So I'll just sort of run through each of the 3 divisions to give you some highlights of what we do, what we've done, and what we're looking forward to for the next year. So the planning division provides current and long-range planning services for the city. The division is responsible for, on the current planning side, the processing of all land use and development proposals within the city to ensure that it meets the development goal, the development code and the goals of the comprehensive plan. In 2022, so last year, we processed over 50 land use permits. And that was a slight increase from the year before. And for the current year of 2023 and into the next fiscal year, we are expecting to see a bit of a decrease on the land use permits that are going to be processed through our department. And that is largely due to the cost increases from inflation and construction material delays, as well as workforce shortages. So we are definitely seeing a decrease in the number of big development applications and proposals coming before us right now. The planning division on the current side also processes several over-the-counter permit applications, such as fencing permits, sign permits, accessory dwelling units, and we also process new single-family homes as over-the-counter permits as well, so it doesn't require land use action. We're also responsible for implementing the city's long-range vision for growth, and that's our long-range planning process. This is accomplished through the implementation of the action items for the goals and policies that are set forth in our comprehensive plan and through all of the periodic updates we do to that plan. Starting last year, we started to undertake 2 major updates to the comprehensive plan with our housing production strategy and the economic opportunity analysis. I'm not going to bore you all with that because you have seen it all over and over and over again. But upon adoption by the city council for those 2 plans, that does set up the work plan for the planning division and the economic development division for the next several years. In addition, we have seen quite the uptick in the state legislature regarding their interest in housing production and land use regulation. And it has been a major focus of theirs this last cycle. And so we are anticipating that through that legislation, we will be seeing an increase in workload regarding additional reporting, procedure modifications, and even possible code modifications associated with that. And of course, it has to be done on the state's timeline. And there's no identified funding source as of yet for that additional work as well. We also manage in the planning division the Community Development Block Grant Program for the Lane County Low-Income Housing Rehabilitation Program. It is budgeted for $150,000 for this next fiscal year, but that is countered with a revenue source through the program as well. And we contract with Dev Northwest to administer that program for us. So we're the fiduciary agent for that. For our building division, we provide plan check review services, building permit issuance, and inspection services through to our building permit final. And that is to ensure that all development in the city meets the building code requirements for safe occupancy of our residents and business owners. To complete the building plan check and inspection services, we employ a building official through a contract with Northwest Code Professionals. This contract is the vast majority of the building fund budget, along with a portion of the salaries for 2 permit technicians that review the submittals, issue the permits, and also maintain all of our permitting records. Last year, the building division issued 691 permits with a total project valuation of $40.6 million of improvement into the community. In comparison to 2021, this was approximately 100 less permits that were issued over the entire year, so a slight reduction. But there was a pretty significant reduction in valuation of projects by $30 million. This basically provides you an indication that work is still being done, construction is still being done, but there has been a shift. There's not large construction projects that are being proposed over and over again. It's a lot of the smaller projects. So still the workload maintains in the department, but less valuation. And also when you have less valuation, our permit fees are associated to valuation. So there's less revenue coming in for a similar amount of work as well. And that work is all done. I have to do a shout out for our lovely permit techs. We have 691 permits that are issued per the last year. That usually equates to 5 or 6 or 7 phone calls per permit to make sure everybody's informed of what needs to happen and the coordination associated with it. So they handle quite a lot for the small team that we have, and they do a fantastic job. And finally, we have the Economic Development Division that ensures that there's sufficient land and infrastructure to accommodate our business and industry development. And it also focuses on business growth and retention, business recruitment, regional economic growth, as well as workforce development. The Economic Development Division is also the administrator for our downtown building restoration program. Through that program, we issued 6 grants for $50,000 of city investment last year. And we are currently underway with the new cycle this year. And we received enough applications for fully funding that grant cycle again this year. In 2022, the division assisted over 120 businesses with resource connection, grant administration, and business startup and expansion efforts. The division also partners with several outside agencies to increase the city's capacity for local economic development goals. And these partnerships increase the amount of tools that we have available to address regional coordination, wetland and industrial site readiness, resource development, workforce development, local business support, as well as business recruitment. We also have a focus on obtaining grants to further economic opportunities within the community. Last year, we brought in over $300,000 in grant monies to support economic development efforts and direct business support to our business community. And for this coming fiscal year, we will continue to leverage those outside funding sources. We are looking at several different grants that are coming up this fall to achieve additional grant monies coming in for the economic development purposes. And then we also will be focusing on implementing the large number of action items that are contributed through the economic opportunity analysis. The staffing and support for the Economic Development Division is myself, and we also have an Economic Development Catalyst. And the budget for that division is largely related to salaries and benefits with minor materials and services included. And with that, I can answer any questions.
Anybody have any questions?
I would just say that as far as on behalf of the chamber, I rely on being able to, I guess, call out and ask for assistance and use the city's economic development department as a resource. And that has, and I've never been disappointed. I think I commend you guys for that. I do have a question on there's a significant materials and services decrease from, what is that? Do you know?
Yeah, in our efforts to cut around the edges for a reduction of budget this year, we did take out a significant budget for training and conferences that would provide us with networking assistance and being able to further our training for grant writing and also through AWIDA grant services as well.
Okay, thank you.
Real quick, I had a question. The 6 grants that we give away for the 50,000, does that come from the general fund?
No, that's funded through the transient lodging tax.
Oh, the motel tax, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
I want to compliment you also. I will say with our nonprofit, when we've been looking at buildings and places to go, I make a phone call and she or her office are there giving us advice, giving us parameters to work within and things to look at. And we're even looking at building a building, and she made sure that where we were looking is a place that we could do it, and then sent me all the requirements for it. So we can get pre-armed when we start trying to make our decisions. And it's very, very helpful to have that. And someone with a weird sense of humor makes it easier for me to operate with. So I appreciate that very much.
Thanks.
I don't talk to you, do I? Okay,
Good?
thank you very much.
Kelly.
Thank you, Kelly. Okay, information technology, Brent? And please speak English, not tech.
Thank you, KJ. I will try.
Okay.
So I manage the IT and GIS departments here at the city. There are 6 of us total. One of us does GIS primarily, and the rest of us try and keep computers running. We also contract with the fire district to provide IT services and phone support for them as well. One of the big projects we worked on in fiscal year 2023 or this year has been that new build they're doing over on Oak Street. And that will continue for the next fiscal year. There's quite a bit of work to help get that building outfitted for them. On the city side, last year, we really focused on cybersecurity upgrades. So last spring, our insurance provider came out with a new set of requirements for qualifying for cybersecurity insurance, which resulted in a discussion about what level of cybersecurity insurance do we want. We decided to go for a higher tier so that we were protected better if we had an incident. And using some of the ARPCA dollars, we were able to buy new hardware, software, training, tools, assessments, and met that. So kind of hit 2 goals, protecting the city better, training staff, as well as giving us better insurance. Our budget for next year, for fiscal year 2024, is really fairly consistent with 2023. There is an increase, and that increase is largely due to a project that we're planning on doing for the SCADA, the wastewater and the water treatment plants, to modernize those systems. It will help increase operator efficiencies as far as how they can get to the controls, use them, as well as it will modernize some of our security layers down there. On GIS side, in 2023 fiscal year, this last year, we finished about a 15 to 18-month project to do our water distribution system. So we upgraded that system. That gives the guys engineering and public works planning primarily better tools to work on the infrastructure of the city, plan upgrades, and just meet like development requests and different requests the city has. For this next year, they're smaller projects, but we hope to get the storm and the sewer systems also upgraded and kind of cut our teeth on the water distribution upgrade. And I think that we should get both of those done this next year. Another project we have is our ci.lebanon.or.us email address that always takes people multiple times to get. I think it was 2017, we registered for LebanonOregon.gov, and our website is LebanonOregon.gov. And it's always been one of those projects that would be nice to get to. And I think in the light of everything that we've been doing and security, et cetera, it's time to upgrade our domain internally. That's a goal we have this year. That would make everyone's email address by default LebanonOregon.gov, and it would align all the internal services to that website. And lastly, and Nancy did note this before in our opening budget message, and that is an upgrade of our city website, just to kind of freshen things up, give us a professional appearance as a city, and provide services to the citizens that we all use digitally now and want to use. That's it for my department. So any questions?
Can you go into the upgrade just a little bit? I was talking with Nancy about it, and it kind of struck me funny when it said ADA accessibility. When I think ADA accessibility, I think wide doors, cutouts on the sidewalk, things like that. I didn't realize we were looking at descriptive audio and that kind of stuff as well.
Correct. So with ADA accessibility, it's just a set of policies and rules for, if you have a handicap or you cannot read, you need audio assistance. Are your images tagged properly? Are you able to have that website read back to you correctly? That is way out of the scope of what my staff have the ability to do. We work with a contractor. Right now we're with Civic Plus. And I've talked to about 3 different vendors this spring about, what a website upgrade would look like and what tools you have. A lot of these guys have dedicated tools. It's all they do is focus on scouring the website and saying, all right, this is spelled incorrectly, or this image doesn't have a tag, or if you were coming into this needing assistance, you would not be able to get that service correctly.
Yeah, it never dawned on me that, because we use a mouse and we click on things.
Yep.
What if you can't see that?
Yeah.
So how do you do that? And I thought that was pretty interesting. Not that I'd understand how it's done, but it's interesting.
I know in the financial world, there's a lot of lawsuits that
Yeah.
have gone back and forth, and you can get sued for not having a properly ADA accessible website. So
Yeah, and that's what Nancy brought up to me when I asked her about what
It is
exactly does
crazy.
that mean? It's like,
it's crazy.
it's called loss prevention.
Yes. Yep.
So
Risk management.
that's it. Okay, thank you very much.
I'm saying I don't have to remember my email address, ci.lebanon.org, because I get that goofed up still every time.
That is my hope. Yes.
We're going to dumb it down for you, Dave.
Yep.
Appreciate it.
Exactly.
Just push on the to button, it'll give you a list of names. You're good. Okay. And now, strange, we get to see Kim in front and not on the side telling us what to do.
So red means the mic's on, Kim. No.
What was that?
So red means,
Pull it
Thank you.
closer.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
This is going to be short and sweet. Mine are pretty small. So I'm responsible for the mayor and council budget and the city recorder budget. So mayor and council is on page 38. This fund covers city councilor stipends, the iPad data plans, organizational-wide memberships, council expenses, and the Meals on Wheels grant. The proposed budget's $88,137. There's been a slight increase in organizational-wide membership fees. That's really that one. Any questions?
I didn't realize the fees to these different groups were so expensive, but I would imagine most of the materials and services is memberships to League of Oregon Cities, Oregon Cascades West, or
Yeah, that's what that covers.
Okay.
Anything else on that one? Okay, now the fun one. City Recorder's Office. So the City Recorder's Office has 2 FTEs. That's the City Recorder and the Deputy City Recorder. We're on page 54. Sorry, forgot to mention that. I'm not going to go over all the things we do. We sort of work behind the scenes, and I wanted to call that out, all the different aspects of things that we do. Our budget is $289,074. We had an increase in our materials and services. The contract services are up a little this year. Mainly the one for archiving social media was a pretty big jump. Also want to call out that we have over 18,000 documents in our records management system, and you're able to access 13,000 of those documents on our website portal. Any questions? Okay.
Okay, thank you. That was quick. All right, Angela Soulsby.
Good afternoon. I'm another internal service provider, so I don't get to see you all very often. I am here to support the employee group. As the Human Resources Department, we have 2 cost centers, one being Human Resources, the other being Safety and Training. This fiscal year, we accomplished quite a bit. I'm sure some of you have heard all about our ADP implementation. We're still working through that process. That's time and attendance. That's to get us compliant with state and federal time and attendance laws. So that's going somewhat better. We're still working through our 6-month implementation period on that. We also onboarded our safety coordinator position. That's been a huge benefit. I'll give you just a couple of facts and figures on that. Last year, we had a total number of incidents of 13. 4 of those were recordable incidents. Those are recordable to OSHA. The number of workers' comp claims were 6, and we did have 1 OSHA violation with 1 fine attached to that. So far this year, and knock on wood that it stays low, we've only had 3 incidents. We've had 1 recordable incident, and we've had 1 workers' comp claim and 0 OSHA violations. So our safety coordinator is hard at work with our department directors and our employees, getting training and compliance under control. We didn't have that position previously, so that job fell on the directors. We're taking that role away from the directors to help free them up to do their work, and then have that safety coordinator then work with the employees and in coordination with the director to manage a lot of the training and compliance issues. On the HR side, we are working through implementation of a learning system. Right now, we do all of our learning online through CIS. We're converting that over to a new module that will be rolling out in the next fiscal year. We're also working through a conversion from an old recruitment system into a new recruitment system. We're rolling that out now. We have 2 new jobs posted on our new career center. That's an enhancement. One of the enhancements is on the Career Center, we have the opportunity to have a separate Career Center page for the police department. We felt like that would be an enhancement for them because they could customize it. You can add videos and photos and messaging. So having a unique police department website, we've worked with Administrative Assistant Amy, I'm sure you all know her, and she's going to start working on that Career Center page so that when individuals apply for positions at the police department, they kind of get a dedicated Career Center page, and then all other positions will be posted on just the regular Career Center page. So they have those some very unique customizations they can do. Coming up pretty soon, we're also going to be going into open enrollment. There are some changes this year coming up that we're going to be communicating out to employees. We have an ongoing project of updating and modifying our job descriptions. That's something we're working with our safety coordinator on, and that's to get physical requirements added to our job descriptions. If there is an injury, we have to be able to report the physical requirements on a job description to the workers' comp company so they know what that employee can and cannot do. Right now, our job descriptions do not have physical requirements on them. We are finalizing, hopefully ratifying, ratification meeting next week with AFSCME on some contract changes. We also have a contract opener next year with Teamsters, so that will be another big project that we're working on. And I think those are our main projects. Any questions for us?
I have a question if
Sure.
nobody else does. You were talking about on the safety coordinator, claims are down.
Mhm.
Is that, you compared a whole year to how much of this year? Just the first
Just to date.
4 months?
Correct.
So if you took the same 4 months last year to this year, what's that look like?
I don't have that. I could get it for you. I'm not sure what our numbers were as far as through
Yeah, I'd
the
like
end
to
of
see
May.
apples to apples, not apples
Sure.
to oranges.
I also have a question on the safety coordinator.
Mhm.
You'd mentioned that that was already in, that position has already been in play.
It was hired last August, so
Okay, so that was part of last year's budget as well?
it was used as cost savings from another position, so it wasn't budgeted
Okay.
ahead of time.
Okay.
Yep.
So the 130,000 in personnel and service for safety and training is that new position?
Right.
And then in the personnel services for human resources, the increase is just contract negotiations based on 281,000 this year versus 258,000 last year.
Right. It's all salaries and wages associated with that new position. Our materials and services are less than $20,000 for all of us. So it's all in salaries and wages for our department.
You mentioned the safety and security coordinator. It was about 130, and I see it's a new position to HR. Did that come from another department, or did that just come from HR's budget? I mean, we didn't see it last year, so I'm just a little confused how it came this year.
Right. And I'm not the numbers person, so I would have to probably defer to Brandon on how the money was found.
Thanks, Brandon.
So that position utilized vacancy savings out of one of our utility funds. There was a position that was not filled this year by choice of the department. And so we utilized those funds to bring the position on board this current fiscal year. And then moving forward, yes, would be part of the internal service funds and spread across the organization.
Okay.
So if I understand it correctly, we took a position from wastewater and moved it over.
Yep.
To put a point on it, where it came from.
We can do that?
Huh?
Okay.
No, they took a position from wastewater and moved it.
Yeah.
We didn't move the position. The position is still over in the wastewater fund, and there was justification as far as the work that's being done out of the utility treatment at the wastewater treatment plant, and across the Public Works Department as a whole. It was determined at that point that the justification was there to house the position there.
Long-term, like, that's not a position they're going to need to fill.
The position is budgeted in the 24 budget, the wastewater one, so the position's not going away by any means. But that
So
would be up to the
so in
department to
this
decide to fill
budget,
it.
we're keeping the wastewater
Yep.
and we're adding the safety
That's correct.
person.
So our sewer bills are paying for the safety person?
For this current fiscal year, yes.
Okay. I don't really love that, just so
No,
I'm
I-
going to just be on record and say that I don't love that coming out of that fund for that. So,
That makes two of us.
okay.
It's confusing to me because normally the water utilities are dedicated.
That's correct. The position was added and has spent a considerable amount of time this year at the wastewater plant in terms of trying to deal with safety there, in addition to other public works operations. So the person's been out working with crews on construction sites, has been working with parks crews and reviewing, practices, the tree cutting groups, has been acquiring, so like an issue came up, parks crews in cleaning parks oftentimes come across needles. They did not have puncture-proof gloves. That's PPE that we should be providing. So that came up in inspections, and then our safety coordinator works with Public Works to acquire those gloves and make sure our staff is appropriately clothed, I guess would be the word, in terms of the PPE they need. It was an opportunity to use savings from a position that was being left open purposely for the year to assess kind of need for that position at the plant and start trying to address some of the safety issues that we have had as an organization. And that position is working with other departments, so moving it into human resources, allocating the costs across the organization. It's included inspections of buildings, identifying where we don't have AEDs that we should, identifying where we have way out of date medications in, aspirin and those kinds of things, in first aid kits that employees are using, Band-Aids that don't stick anymore, and updating those. So we just, as an organization, have not been paying attention to that, trying to pay attention to that.
So, but this cleans that up. That my concern is that the funds coming out of utility funds are special and legally so and rightfully so. So just to clarify, this ends that and cleans it up.
Correct.
Moving forward. Yes, that makes me happy.
Do you have any details on what the OSHA violation was and where that took place?
Yes, and I can, I'm sure when Jason's up, he can share more details, but I do know that there was a gas line that was struck with some heavy equipment.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, thank you. I'd like to hear the answer, though.
I will get that back to you.
Okay, thank you. Okay, Brandon, you're up.
Good afternoon, everybody. So I get the pleasure of talking to you about the finance department, and I'm also going to throw non-departmental in there because I realized we haven't talked about that yet, which is in your budget. So the finance department consists of two different areas. First, obviously, finance, and the finance office overall covers a multitude of functions: utility billing, audit functions, the budget that is before you, built in collaboration with the city manager's office, accounts receivable, accounts payable, and then just general finance accounting functions. To accomplish all of those duties, I've got 5 FTE in the office, including myself. We did do a little bit of a position reorganization in this current fiscal year. A vacancy opened up with our accounting supervisor. And instead of replacing that position, we instead repurposed that to bring on a payroll specialist. I think that was a good move for us. We had one individual, we had an accountant that was doing all of the payroll work, and that's not what they were originally hired for. This person is well-versed in state and federal payroll laws, has spent considerable time with our new payroll system that you've all heard about. And we think that moving forward, this is going to be what's best for the organization to ensure that we comply with all of the rules. That did actually save us some money overall as well. So that adjustment saved about $38,000 in salary and benefit costs, through which we are replacing some of that with the ADP software that has landed in my budget. But overall, I'm still $10,000 less between those two changes in my overall budget. The rest of my budget is primarily contract services. We have multiple debt obligations as far as fees associated with our debt and management thereof. And then certainly audit each year is a considerable cost for us. And then just kind of general banking services and report filings that we have to make as a city. So all of those costs, and our overall finance system, Springbrook, is a considerable cost as well. So all of that is housed inside the finance office in the materials and service budget. The other function for finance is the supervision of municipal court. So as finance director, I oversee 3 FTE over in court. I do not oversee the judge. That is the purview of the city council. And so my function is really just supervising the day-to-day operations in the court. And obviously the judge has the purview to enforce as he sees fit. There's not a lot of changes in the court budget for the coming year. Everything in there is really a required expenditure. We do sometimes save some money throughout a year in the materials and supplies, or materials and services budget, because the primary expense there is the cost associated with providing legal counsel for folks in front of the court. Otherwise, after that, it's paying, the state fees, paying the county for their portion of what we collect. So everything is fairly straightforward in that budget overall. Any questions that I can answer about finance and municipal court?
I have sorry.
I just wondered when the payroll specialist came on board.
We had that position start the beginning of April.
Thank you.
Very recent,
Sorry,
yes.
Mrs. Grizzle. Didn't mean to cut you off.
And maybe this is not the right time, but we have yet to talk about PERS. And normally, I feel like every year we talk about PERS, and we have not yet this year. Are we on an off year for an increase?
No, we actually have an increase beginning July 1. And there is, in the budget summary overview, there's also a projection of the likely increases for July 1, 25 and July 1, 27. Yeah.
Okay.
I will note, there are no projected decreases.
Yeah, okay.
So page 32 in your budget document has a whole section dedicated to discussing the PERS rate increases for the coming biennium. And then as Nancy said,
Okay.
dated the projection for the following 2 bienniums. by Nia.
Okay, thank you.
Can I ask a question on that, PERS? Is this the right, or is there a later point where it'd be more
This is fine.
appropriate?
No, go ahead, ask.
So I'm seeing in 2023, I'll just look at general service. PERS, it says 25.16%.
Mhm.
Help me understand that number. Is that what the employer is contributing on behalf of the employee?
That is the amount that the city's paying into the overall pension fund on behalf of an employee,
And
for an
that's-
employee.
And that's referencing 25.16% of the employee's
Of their
wages.
gross earnings, yes.
So that's on top of their gross earnings.
Correct. Yeah, they have their gross earnings, and then we pay an additional 25.16% into the pension fund, which does cover some of the unfunded liability, and some of the, trying to catch the system up to the best of its ability. As we outlined in that second paragraph on that page, the unfunded liability for PERS is about 20%, which means if everything came to a head today, they couldn't make their ends meet. And so certainly state and local municipalities are on the hook for that unfunded liability.
All right, that's what I was wondering.
It's why I like my tier 1 retirement.
Tier 1 and tier 2.
And people
Very
wonder why I
nice.
say peachy all the time. Any other questions? I'd like to ask about ADP,
Sure. I
how
can
that's
try.
going.
We, with any software transition, I think that we've had some stumbles. We are a different organization than I think ADP is used to working with. However, ADP has worked with many state and local agencies in the past. We are currently working through a few more hurdles, I would say, that we have discovered as we've kind of dug our heels in, or as we've made changes, then something else has to change in order to accommodate our unique payroll. But that is part of why we also decided that bringing on a payroll specialist would better serve the city so that they could tackle a lot of that on an everyday basis.
And we've been using them for how long now?
We officially launched with our first payroll January 6th.
And we're still running into issues that we didn't realize?
We went through 3 months, 2 months of what I would call decent payrolls where things were working relatively well. And then certainly we have recently discovered some additional issues that arose in March. And so we are currently fixing those. Some of it is, as we go through and add additional intricacies for various departments to meet needs, that has created additional problems in some cases and answered questions in other places. But it is still a system in transition, I would call it. We're not even 6 months into this. And I would argue that we're doing better than a lot of other places that maybe we've seen are having payroll issues broadly.
I'm not too concerned about other places. I just want to make sure our folks are taken care of properly because they go to work for us every single day. And some of them put their life on the line for us every day.
Right.
I learned in the Army, one thing you never mess with is the soldier's pay. It's just, I want to make sure it's done right.
We value the employees in this organization. We are doing our very, very best to make sure that that system gets built in a manner that will serve this organization in the long run. I'm confident that we will work out any remaining issues and that things will go well down the road, but we are still in an implementation phase.
Are you keeping track of this kind of stuff so you can do an after-action report, lessons learned, that sort of thing?
Yes.
I'd like to sit in on something like that when that comes around.
Okay.
I echo that. I'd like to know how it's going in a kind of deeper dive into some of the issues we've run into and some of the solutions that we've implemented to address those, like later, not right here, but
Yeah, we will certainly work to put something together for you all that can provide some insight.
Yeah, and I'd like to know the hurdles, more specific on what exactly hurdles they're facing and how they've affected staff.
Yeah, if we could do that offline after this meeting, come together and sit down and talk about that. Because I know a lot of us hear things and we'd like to eliminate the hear things and get the facts.
I imagine that in collaboration with the city manager's office and the mayor, we'll work on how best to present that to you all and to get information out.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions? Okay, thank you.
Can I throw non-departmental in there real fast, just so you all have kind of that information?
Sure.
Non-departmental covers expenditures that really don't belong in a specific department. In the city of Lebanon, you will find that in two places. The general fund has a non-departmental section. Primary budget for that area includes the last remaining ARPA dollars for next year that could be utilized for whatever, within certain restrictions, whatever the council deems necessary. So we've budgeted 270,000 for the following fiscal year, for this coming fiscal year for that purpose. There is also a continuing repayment to the Northwest Urban Renewal District after the city exceeded its maximum indebtedness requirements and spent some money on items that maybe it shouldn't have out of the URD in the past. And so 225,000 is budgeted out of the general fund to continue that process of repaying that URD. The other highlight in that area is insurance. We were told by our insurance carrier this year to expect a 35% increase in our property casualty premiums for the coming fiscal year. Certainly a jaw-dropping moment for myself and for the department heads that have insurance requirements in their budgets. That it consists of two different things. The city went through a process this last year in which a kind of reevaluation was done by the insurance company, by CIS, going around reviewing our properties, deciding if there needed to be changes as far as the ultimate valuation of those facilities. Ultimately, that provided a significant increase to our overall premiums. And then a 12% just general rate increase across the board for all organizations is also built into that. So certainly a sticker shock item for us. It did hurt significantly, and certainly something for us to kind of review as we move forward. But that 35% increase is budgeted in the general fund for a part of our overall insurance requirements. The other piece in which you will see kind of non-departmental expenditures is the motel tax fund. Of this is the transient occupancy tax, also known as lodging tax. It goes by many names. We have just north of $100,000 budgeted in overall expenditures, and actually you can see it on page something. Wastewater, there it is, 78. We have, so significant, almost $400,000 in budgeted funds. 228,000 of that is labeled as capital outlay. That's money that has been set aside to enhance some of our parks facilities potentially that could draw additional tourism to the city. And so that money has been set aside and earmarked for that purpose. The 169,000 in materials and services provides, there was a question earlier about, now I'm blanking on the program. Thanks, downtown building restoration. That money is budgeted here, as well as contributions to the chamber and the Lebanon Downtown Association. So that's what I have for non-departmental. Nice and easy.
Anybody got any questions? Okay. Thanks. Let's move on to Ron and Jason, Public Works and Engineering. Somehow they ended up in here on a tag team thing.
They're basically two halves of a whole.
Is that what it is?
That's what, I'm pretty sure that's what it is.
I was thinking of a movie title, but
Don't say it.
I was gonna say Cheech and Chong, but
Could be.
Well, I'll get started with a few that are, we have one internal service fund within Public Works. Public Works is responsible for the maintenance and operation of our utility systems, our city buildings, our city-owned property, our recreation areas. In Public Works, we have 32 positions in total. 31 of them are filled, and we'll have one that remains vacant. I think that's the one we were discussing from the wastewater plant. So starting on page 59 for custodial and building maintenance is our internal service fund. Nancy highlighted earlier that this is an add this year for a fleet mechanic that will help throughout the city. It's really pretty stagnant. We have a little bit of a balance in there, contingencies, so to speak, so we could replace things that fail, which compressors on top of the Justice Center. There's just 4 of them in each unit, and they're already starting to drop off. And so we're building up a little bit of a contingency in that fund to handle some of those things as they happen. Any questions about that one? The next one that is a non-utility is parks. Our Parks Department is responsible for a tremendous amount of acreage and activities within the city. Every sports field, if you know a kid playing on a sports field, we've had something to do with the maintenance of that field, whether it's school district property or City of Lebanon property. The Parks Fund, you'll see, has a infusion of money for this budget year, and that was from a grant we received for the Cheetah Lake project. You guys should remember that one. Other than that, it's maintained really constant. It's just, we're kind of in a just get through it phase, just the maintenance and operation of the facilities. Unfortunately to say, we only have one playground structure in the city of Lebanon that's accessible at all for anybody with ADA restrictions. And that's at Christopher Columbus Park. That's something we hope to change. Any questions on parks? Okay.
So the reason we're doing this probably together is because we're kind of tied at the hip on most everything that happens when it relates to public works and engineering. So for the engineering department, we have 7 FTEs, including myself. We kind of shuffle up and deal every so often and who's going to be doing what. I have one dedicated person that does development, but all told, if you split it out just about right, we'd have about 4.5 FTE towards the capital program, and then probably 2.5 staff person per year to handle the development workload right now. So that's kind of how we're broken out, and it doesn't mean that somebody that's doing capital won't be pulled over to do a development project at some point. We do whatever's in front of us and whatever needs to be done. So all the staff are really good about doing that. We're primarily funded out of water, wastewater, storm, and streets. 38% drain, or 38% water, 5% drainage, 43% streets, or 43% wastewater, and 4% streets. And then our development fund generates about 10% that covers that cost as well. You ask, how did I come up with the numbers? It kind of varies year to year. We base it on how much work we have in sewer this year versus how much work we have in water. So that number shifts a little bit each year. We try and follow where the projects are primarily happening. With that, our operational costs this year, you'll notice some pretty big operational costs. Those aren't necessarily associated with our materials and services, but in the water fund, our operational costs are about 1.7 million. 1.2 million of that is attached to the water treatment plant demolition project. So that'll be a contract project. Same thing in wastewater, about 1.2 million in operational costs, and close to 700,000 of that is sewer lateral program and also your wastewater master plan update. So those are why those are so high. And then of course we have a little bit of operational costs in streets, and in our development review this year, we're projecting it to be at about $160,000 in revenue and permit fees and review fees. So I've got a pretty big list on page 11 of the budget book, which shows the capital projects for this coming year.
Yes, it is.
I'm fairly confident that we're not going to get to all those. We're going to do our best to get to a lot of them. Over the last probably 3 to 5 years, things have really slowed down in terms of how we work with outside agencies. It seems like things have slowed, which increases project time to get things done. So this list here, we'll get a good chunk of it done. But I can pretty much assure you that not all of that's going to get done at one time. And a lot of it depends on where we're working to and how long contracts go and how that all works out. So that's kind of engineering in a nutshell. I can answer any questions. We use SDCs a lot, and utility funds. So, but I'm more than happy to answer any questions.
Ron, the increase in the lateral program, which I'm glad to see, is that enough or will we still run out, do you think?
So
What's the projection?
Part of the budget presentation was done, was out to print. That's actually changed yet again. There's about 330,000 budgeted to laterals this year.
Wow. And
Is that enough?
When we started the beginning of that program, wasn't it like 50 or I can't remember what,
It was right around 90.
was it?
So to give you a snapshot of what that looks like, probably 3 to 4 years ago, we were 6,000 on average per lateral.
Yeah.
Right now, I looked, our lowest lateral last year was 12,000.
Wow. Okay.
So that in and of itself has been a big hit. We had some that were 25,000. So, if you're on a truck route and you're really deep, it makes those prices go up. But we're not doing any more this year. We're going out and we're getting the quotes for them so that they'll be ready to go on July 1. Right now, we're sitting at about 50,000 starting July 1. So we'll see how it goes. But there comes a point where we can't put all of our money into laterals and not put money into our sewer mains as well. So where's that balance? And then next year, that 50,000, maybe there's not any more. I doubt it, but it's hard to predict.
It's a great program. Are we the only ones doing it or there are other municipalities?
I think there's other municipalities that do it. Yeah.
Couldn't remember.
Yeah. It's for a homeowner, it's a good thing, but it's also a good thing for us in terms of ridding the system of inflow and infiltration, which just means Jason has to treat it when they come out there because our old laterals tend to be very leaky. And so you get a lot of groundwater into them.
Yeah.
We are doing some for the remainder of this fiscal year in-house as we can, because it is such a big deal for us to plug some of these leaks.
On the wish list there, the engineering projects, you said you might not get to all those this year, and I understand that. Will that money just carry, because it's they're all budgeted for this fiscal year, it'll just carry over into the next year, what isn't used for
That's the wonderful thing about the utilities. It's not so wonderful that you can't get everything done, but the great news is it doesn't get spent. It just carries forward. So, and we find that with a lot of our projects, we'll budget for them and then, that might not happen this year, but you've still got that money and you do it next year. So, yeah.
As long as you get the airport installed till light in, I'll be happy.
Yes.
That's-
Yes, I would agree.
Yes.
That's
Okay.
been
Any
very
questions for
challenging.
these gentlemen?
I actually have one more out of this. We spent some time talking about the safety officer,
Safety coordinator.
safety coordinator. Sounds like you two have had direct interaction or maybe seen results from that. Do you feel like you think it's enough bang for the buck to justify that position as far as engineering and public works are concerned?
I have not had much interaction with that position. I think Jason's probably had the most interaction with that position with the plants, but I've had very little interaction with that position.
Yeah, so the OSHA violation was a gas line that we hit. That was really valuable, having someone else take care of that record keeping for us and kind of break that root cause stuff down. Normally it would be something I would do. The involvement at the wastewater treatment plant, we took that over. We had really no idea what we were getting into. Nobody on our staff had ever ran a wastewater treatment plant before, so it was a crash course in learning. And so the safety concerns out there, I mean, we were just using best management practices. So it's nice to have some backup as far as that's concerned. What the results are, I have no idea.
Okay.
That's Nancy's job.
Yeah, I'm just curious, like, long-term, if this is one of those things where once everyone's properly trained and caught up on this, if it'd be something we could manage internally again, like this is almost an audit being done. I hate to add positions when you look at like the PERS cost being 32% in a few years from now. And the general tone of the budget is, I wouldn't say doom and gloom, but it's not all roses. So to add a position now, that may be a position we have to cut later, and I just hate to do that. So I was just trying to see how much benefit you guys are seeing from that position.
One thing that I would note is all of our public works contracts require the contractor to have a safety program. So it would not be the responsibility of the city of Lebanon to go in and tell contractor X how to implement their safety program. They're all required to do that. Obviously, if there's something that's grossly negligent, our inspectors will be on top of that, but that's not our role out there in the field, especially on contract stuff.
Thank you.
I have a question. In Nancy's budget message, she talks about, and you guys have talked about it before, the PFAS. I don't know if I'm saying that correctly.
Yeah.
Anyway, so I just want to make sure, if this is likely, these changes are likely either at the federal or state or some level that's going to tell us what to do. Are we doing anything? Is there anything we can do to prepare ourselves and be ready for something like that? I'm just looking ahead, and I assume someday someone's going to tell us we have to track this stuff or to take it out or whatever, so.
Yeah, we're doing that now. We started sampling 2 months ago for that. We haven't been directed to, but the last thing I want to do is come before you guys and say, hey, we need $350 million right now today.
This is why I'm asking the question. Yeah.
So we're trying to get an idea of what our system has.
Okay.
What our potential risk would be so that maybe we can plan responsibly to correct that. What the limits are, what level of removal we'll have to have. If we'll have to have any level of removal, that's just going to come out of the regulations from Oregon Health
Okay.
Authority.
Well, I'm glad to hear, at least, you've been tracking it, and then at least we know when it comes down, we'll know what to anticipate, so.
Yeah, and we'll keep you guys updated when we get results for that, as we get results for those tests. We'll have the same battle with the lead and copper rule that's coming out throughout the city. There's really no rule yet. There's nothing defined. There's not a course of action for the new regulations, but there will be. So we're trying to ready ourselves the best that we can for that.
Thank you for forward thinking on that. I appreciate it.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Yeah.
Any other questions? Okay, gentlemen, thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, we've got an addition to this. Did you guys want to talk at the same time? Okay.
So you have several public hearings that you need to hold. The first one scheduled is on state revenue sharing, and basically you're going to open the public hearing, see if anyone wants to
Okay,
speak on state
that's why
revenue
I'd asked,
sharing.
did you want me to do this right after these?
And then right after state revenue, and my assumption is no one wishes to speak on state revenue sharing because nobody ever does. But then move to the
So you
Lebanon
want-
budget.
You want to do
and-
these after the,
And that would be the public hearing for the budget. You would call on
okay.
people who wish to speak for the public hearing on the budget. Does that make sense?
Probably not, but we'll figure it out.
Okay.
They would speak on 7B after you open that hearing.
Okay.
Yeah.
They'll talk on 7B. Okay. All right, well, hang tight. We'll get right to you. Okay, public hearing. I'm going to open the public hearing on state shared revenues at this time at 2:23 PM.
So you want to give this? Sure.
Sorry. So state revenue sharing, those are items, they are primarily, they're all contained in our general fund. We get, one line is just considered state revenue sharing. It's just kind of a general pot that the state distributes to all municipalities. Most of the revenues distributed are all based on per capita figures, so population counts, as delivered by Portland State University and their population research center, I think it is, or something like that. The other items that we receive in state revenue sharing consist of, I'm going to forget all of them. We get a portion of marijuana taxes that is significantly lower than it has been in the past due to the passage of Measure 110. We also receive state revenue sharing from what it was generally been called in the past sin taxes, so cigarette taxes, liquor taxes. Am I missing one?
That's it.
That's it. Quite honestly, you can find all of these on page 108 of your budget document. But primarily, we've seen some small increase and based on what the state revenue forecasts are telling us to expect. The one that has gone down over the years is the state cigarette revenue. And you can see that in the corresponding line as cigarettes are just less popular these days. So, but otherwise, for the most part, everything else is up. Those revenues we allocate just for the general purpose of the organization. We spend them in the general fund to offset departments that don't have dedicated revenues.
Any questions? Okay. Will the city attorney please read the title of the resolution?
Oh, it's not a resolution.
That's what you just handed
Oh,
me.
that's general motions on the bottom.
General motion. Well, you want a general motion or?
I can make a motion.
Yeah.
I move to recommend the City of Lebanon Council adopt state revenue sharing monies as non-dedicated revenue of the general fund.
Second.
Been moved and seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? You can give him that back. I don't need that.
Just
Confused me.
Like that's what.
Confused Trey over there. He was getting ready. What am I reading? I'll try not to. No one wants the lawyer awake. Okay, I will close the public hearing on state shared revenues. I can't use that. That's too.
I know.
That's-
Do you want me to use it for you?
Yeah, would you please? Thank you. Only a fireman. Okay, FY 2023-24 proposed City of Lebanon budget. And I will open that hearing now.
Yes.
Now, we have some public testimony. Jeannie and Cody, at last you get to speak.
Thank you for your patience.
Thank you for your patience and our weird humor.
Makes it so much better
Yeah, go ahead and pull those things in close to you.
because I'm that short. I got to talk louder. I was told that before. So we're here on behalf of the Lebanon Downtown Association and your continued support for our Main Street manager. Our Main Street manager is instrumental in keeping us connected with Oregon Main Street, their resources, their grant funding, and having the time and ability to help our merchants with grant funding. Last year, we were able to write a grant for $200,000 and help 2 of our downtown businesses with renovations of the 2nd floor. Without our Main Street manager, that time that it takes to write those grants is going to be almost impossible for a very active board. Everybody's doing as much as they can to bring events downtown, to bring activities for Main Street, but really the overall operations of the Downtown Association really has to come from our Main Street manager. In your packet, I did pass out I was really ready to present at City Council in May and I got all messed up. So this is kind of a little bit of that, what we do and who we are. Through the last 30 days of all of our Facebook traffic, all of the events, Cinco de Mayo, we had 30 businesses engage with us for Cinco de Mayo, our first Friday. So we've increased our following on Facebook. We've increased our Instagram following. And these are not just individuals in Lebanon, they're individuals from Eugene to Salem. And so we'll present that data as well. We worked really hard last month to get our finances in order to get from our former treasurer to our new treasurer, Cody, and kind of looked at our finances. And as you can see in your packet, our funding source is pretty much the city, and that is for our Main Street manager. We do have some donations. We do have some sponsorships. Sponsorships are specific for the events that we have. So an individual organization will sponsor a Brews and Bands in the Park for one weekend. So we do have that as well. And our expenses, of course, are our Main Street manager that puts in so much work, connecting our downtown businesses with grant funding, opportunities, resources. And yeah, operations. Operations is really just our printing and our advertising. Our online expenses is our our donation, online donation program that we use, and our Google Drive, that normal stuff, and our website design. So there's not a lot of expenses other than having that Main Street manager there available for us to keep our community connected and really improve downtown. So also in your packet, I wrote kind of our accomplishments for the 2022. We are organized by 4 committees: operations, promotions, design, and economic vitality. And kind of in that, you can see all the work that each of our committees has done in the last 12 months. We do have a community cleanup day coming up, and we have other programs that we're looking at right now to add to that. Movies in the park, those kind of things, hopefully a Saturday market combining with the one that's already here in town. But really that overall organization of what we can do really is going to come from our Main Street manager position. I'll turn it over to Cody.
So just wanted to talk a little bit about the restoration reimbursement. And this year we had reimbursed $127,756.32 from the state to restoring buildings downtown. We have seen a vast improvement and just a facelift. We also have been, if you look at the numbers for last year, we've got a significant increase this year so far in Q2 from donations and sponsorships. In fact, our entire last year, we were about 60% of what we received in donations last year already to date here in the first 5 months. Gina talked about the movies in the park. That's a new endeavor. We've ordered our screen and facilities for that. We already have 3 of the 6 movie series for the summer sponsored by different businesses. We're working on the National Guard coming out, providing obstacle courses, pull-up competitions, food carts, just adding to the festivities, and that's going to be held here at Ralston Park. Academy Square now. We're kind of transitioning a lot of the stuff over there. Music in the Concerts in the Park series and Bands and Brews are still ongoing and becoming better than ever as we are engaging more with the communities. One of the big things with economic vitality, tonight we have our first meeting with our block captains. A lot of these are, as we rebrand and reorganize, we're throwing some new partnerships in there. So we do have merchants participating in our block captain program, and that is that there's a block captain for each block downtown to be able to be a transmitter and receiver of information that's pertinent to business owners here. One of the, as everyone knows, one of the ongoing debates downtown is, are we opposed to homeless sleeping areas downtown? Our job as block captains are to be the voice of our merchants and community members. So one thing that we are doing is going out and interviewing issues like this, interviewing each and every business owner and representative of those businesses to see what was your take on these certain circumstances and how do we represent you better. So you'll see me probably speaking here at our next meeting on things like that. But it's just important for us to be hearing the voices of merchants, making sure that downtown is being properly represented. That's pretty much all I got for you today.
Any questions?
So I understand you guys are asking for the manager to be included in the budget.
Correct, yeah.
Correct.
And what's the number you're talking?
30,000.
Yeah, it was 30,000 last year. We'd like to continue that in the budget. We've worked with the Secretary of State. We're compliant. We've done our 990. They let me go back 3 years, so we did 20, 21, and 22, waiting for any more paperwork beyond that. But right now, we're in good standing.
Secretary of State as well.
Yeah,
You're in good standing with Secretary of State.
correct.
IRS?
Yes.
Yeah,
Well,
990
Did they
postcards.
give you a conditional approval?
Not yet, but we have our paperwork in.
So
For
you're
the
not,
last 3
you're not
years.
a 501c3 currently.
We have our receipts for
You put the
filings.
paperwork in.
Yeah, we
but
filed.
you're
Yes.
Not currently a 501c3 because that
Correct,
got
yeah.
dumped in 2015.
Right, we've done a lot of work in the last 6 months to get out of that hole financially, and figure out where that we've all dropped the ball on. We're working really hard on that. So right now, we submitted paperwork to the IRS for the last 3 years. We're waiting for them to come back and tell us if we need to do more. And that was from the advice of Oregon Main Street. We called them, we had a conference with Oregon Main Street. How do we clean this up?
Right, and that's good. And I think having a vibrant downtown association is good, but being good stewards of the money that we are handing out is important also. So right now, you're not a 501c3. You're waiting for approval, but you did get your CT 12 done and
Yes.
into the state. And I see that the Secretary of State is recognizing you
Correct.
as Partners for Progress, not LDA.
Right, we've always been Partners for Progress. That's the way it started.
LDA to LDA.
Yeah, we operate under LDA.
Yeah.
But yeah, our Secretary of State registry is Partners for Progress.
I'm not comfortable providing money when we've had this much issues in money management and reporting. I think that, do we have a contract with them?
We do not have a contract with them for 24 yet. We do have one with them for the current fiscal year. We would be negotiating a new contract with them for fiscal 24.
And previously, did we just provide them the funds?
We did,
Yeah, I mean, lump sum kind of thing.
yes.
And did we ever get an accounting on how that money was spent?
No, other than what you have in front of you. I haven't seen balance sheets or income
Well, we
statements.
don't
or
have any
anything,
of that.
so-
We also don't ask that of the chamber too. I'm just saying, just
No,
so
but
we're
my
treating
understanding was the
everybody fairly
agreement
here.
was that they would provide that before.
That has been in the agreement, yes.
And
So it's not asking for something new. It's something that was agreed to.
Okay, that was my mistake. I wasn't aware of that. So.
Yeah.
Is
Before we approve it, I would recommend that we get an agreement re-upped with some performance matrices or reporting matrices, and we pay it out on a quarterly basis kind of thing. So it will help us and will help you guys maintain accountability when you got to do it every quarter to get the money.
Yeah, I'm all for
Totally
that.
agree.
Yeah. I was brought on here as treasurer in February, the end of February, and we did find some things that needed to be addressed. Obviously, some of these things that we're talking about now came to light, and been spending some time trying to make sure that, at least from then through now, our reporting and financialing has been kept up to date. I do have quite a few years of backdating to go through. So that is something I'm working.
Yeah, working in the
to rectify.
nonprofit field myself, I know how easy it is to miss things, and things can fall through the crack.
Yeah.
And things get very confusing when you're trying to balance federal versus state and CT 12990 easy or
Yep.
big one or whatever. But it's something that I believe you need to get your hands around so that the community can believe in it too.
Yeah, absolutely. And I would appreciate and enjoy working actually with the city on a quarterly basis because it's, frankly, this is my first treasury and first nonprofit board spot here. So, yeah, the more experience, the better for the organization.
Well, I'm just one person, but my thought is you need to get that agreement in place before monies are agreed to. We can get that done before the June council meeting, I think.
I like the idea of directing staff to work with LDA to accomplish that, so we're not getting involved in it until it comes to us for approval. Does staff, does Nancy feel like she has enough information to follow with this? If this is something there's a consensus of council on?
So I have the information I need. I think I would like to have just a motion that would give me the timeline. If you wanted to see the contract on your agenda in June, doing public hearings first, we would do the budget adoption and the contract would come later, but having it in the packet, if I had a motion on it, that would give us, LDA and staff, a hard deadline to get an agreement put in place and ready to go into packet. So if you wish to make a motion, I would.
Once we close the public hearing, correct?
Yeah.
Thank you.
So that's where I am on it. Just,
Okay, so it's a doable thing. And we would do the motion when? After it closes?
after you close the public hearing and you've got two motions in the packet here, so
And then we'll do a third one.
that would be fine.
Okay, good. Anybody else have any questions?
Well, I'm not as familiar as KJ with the dotting and the i's and the crossing of the t's we're counting on here, but I want you to know I fully support that position and what it can do for downtown. And I think it's imperative that we have somebody paying attention to that. And I appreciate that you are.
Yeah, thank you for your
Thank you.
time.
Question for Nancy.
Yes.
That position is funded by the hotel tax previously? Is that where that money was coming out of?
That is correct, and that's where it is in the budget that's proposed in front of you. The $30,000 is in the motel tax fund.
And if it's, okay, that's previously that $30,000 came out of the motel tax fund,
That's correct.
but that $30,000 isn't in this next year's budget for that position.
It is. It is in there.
Okay.
So a couple things to remember. One is you can appropriate it and not spend it.
Yeah.
But if you don't appropriate it, you definitely can't spend it.
Right.
So it's oftentimes better to appropriate, and even if we couldn't get to agreement or the council said, we don't want to turn over any money until December, let's see what happens, we would not spend the money based on that direction. But if we don't have the appropriation, we can't create it after the budget is adopted.
But it is appropriated now.
It is in the budget, and assuming that it stays in the budget, what the council would take up at the June meeting and your public hearing and adoption would include that $30,000. And again, at that
We're
point,
about
you
to
could,
adopt it
you could
and
take it,
appropriate
the council could take it out of the budget at the council table. Even if the budget committee leaves it in and moves it forward, the council can take it out.
All right.
So
This
I-
whole time I thought they were asking because we had cut it out of the budget. That's why I was a little confused.
Nope.
Okay.
No, it's in there.
All right.
The, if anybody's wondering why this is taking so long, the bottom line is, it's not our money. It's everybody else's money. So we got to be responsible in being good stewards of this money. Okay? That goes for all entities that receive funds. So I'm for a motion that would, to hold them to benchmarks and do it quarterly, as long as they obtain the benchmarks. I believe in the program. I think it's a good program, but it needs to be run above board. And I'm not going to cast aspersions on past people that were in the downtown association at all, because that's not my job. But it is my job to make sure that the money's being taken care of, it's being spent correctly. And we're able to have a report on it, of where it's going. You just seen a bunch of directors that work very hard, come up here and sit in that chair right there and ask a lot of questions. So I know it's all volunteer, most of the part for the Downtown Association, and the city of Lebanon and the citizens of Lebanon appreciate that, all the hard work. I've benefited from the program. That's why I think, I believe in the program, but I also believe in being good stewards of the money. So back to you.
Okay, anybody have any other questions? Sure.
Yeah, first, thank you, Mr. Mayor, for recognizing that we are spending the citizens' money. But from that point of view, this is my third year, and this is an outstanding document this year. It's, if you remember right, we're having a big fight in the legislature right now because they're writing everything that nobody can understand. You can understand this. You can understand this with a fourth grade education. That's great. We need to continue to do things like that. And I think that's hats off to you, Nancy,
Thank you.
for providing that to make it easy to understand. My other question to the council is, I live over on the canal just by Shadle Lake, and there's been explosive growth in my neck of the woods. And explosive growth everywhere if you look at all the multifamily. Are you guys collecting enough in development fees or whatever to cover some of this? Because from a business point of view, the growth is phenomenal, but from a budget point of view, it don't look so good. So I think that's a hard question you're gonna have to continue to ask yourself is, with all this growth, how are we gonna pay for it? You would think it would pay for itself, but apparently it's not. So that's my general comment to the council. Thank you.
Let me see if I can answer that in, I was going to say in 15 words or less, but it's going to take longer. When new development happens, a developer pays a number of fees. They pay building permit fees. They may pay planning fees to go annex a piece of property or to develop that property and identify where the infrastructure is going associated with it. They pay systems development charges, which are designed to cover future costs of expansion to existing infrastructure that is only needed because we have additional growth. So if you think about a water treatment plant built to provide water for 40,000 people, at some point as this community grows close to 40,000 and you have to expand the plant, you have to have money for that somewhere. You say between 20,000 and 40,000, all those people who move in are going to contribute systems development charges that provide most of the funding for that plant expansion in the future. None of those fees pay for the general fund services. There is no impact fee for adding police officers, or the fire department would tell you adding another fire station or firefighters. There are no impact fees that cover the cost of additional land use planning services, additional people at the library. None of that is built into any of those resources. So we sit with the primary revenue in the general fund is the property tax with tax rates that were set in 1997 with growth in assessed value limited basically to 3% a year. So you heard me earlier talking about our labor agreements. You've got a cost of living adjustment that's 4% on a revenue that's growing 3%. Now, sometimes we've had good years. So next year we're projecting 5% growth in property tax. So you get the 3% basic on your home and your home and your home, but you get a little bit more for the new development. And we're thinking that that's about another 2% in revenue next year. Some years, yes, some years, no, you don't get that new development. But I will tell you that over the long term, and this is part of the reason for the 5-year financial plan, that revenue is not growing as fast as our expenses. And you have heard routinely, we should have more police officers, but it's expensive. And we don't have the revenue coming in to fund that. We should be funding the jail. We should be funding senior services, right? And those are the challenges that I think we're in, along with almost every other community in this state. Places like Beaverton, which is a very wealthy community with huge industrial tax base, they're looking at cutting their budget because their revenue growth is not keeping up with their expense growth. And unfortunately, there is no room to have an impact that says you build a new apartment building, you're gonna pay an impact fee that will bank and just meter out the interest on to pay for additional police officers. That isn't a part of the equation anywhere. That's not an allowed fee. Hope that answers your question.
So is inflation driving this more?
Inflation drives our costs. There are some costs that are driven by growth. You heard Frank, Chief Stevenson talk about officers per thousand. And so as the community grows, if you're not growing your police officers, you get, you kind of move from 1.2 to 1.1 to 1 officer per thousand, right? And so at some point, you have to be able to add officers to have, to bring that ratio up to what is a recommended best practice. And that is simply not being, there's not enough money coming in to do that.
Well, and with the state's insistence now that we have even more multifamily in the equation, your outlook has to even be more dismal then if you have more multifamily.
So this, and I will say this, the state, I think, is less focused on multifamily. They are certainly focused on additional housing across a broad range of prices. They have a lot of focus right now on affordable housing because housing has become so expensive. And, a young married couple with basic jobs, school teachers, don't make enough money to buy a house that is being built today. And I think as you look at that challenge, then you've got to find a way to either pay everybody more money, or you have to be able to find housing at lower costs. And that gets very much into the state's push for more affordable housing. That's the work the council's been doing on the housing production strategy, which is what can we look at? Can we go to smaller houses on smaller lots that would be more affordable as a way to help even mid-level, we're not even talking like, very low income people, but middle income people being able to acquire housing and move out of an apartment, for example. From a financing perspective right now, developers seem to be able to make a profit building multi-family housing that they don't seem to be able to make building single-family housing, or we would be seeing more developers coming in doing single-family housing. And a lot of that's inflation, it's supply chain, it's the lack of labor, it's interest rate costs, which if you're old enough, 6.5%, yeah, okay, it's worse than, it's worse than 2, but I've seen way worse than that. First house I bought, I was happy to get 13%. So, everything is coming together in that discussion. And there is no easy answer. There is no push a button. There is no, fairy godmother with a magic wand coming in saying, poof, you have money. I will say that I do, in some of the lobbying work I do with legislators, I try to make it perfectly clear that at the local government level, we do not have the money to do basic services, let alone add on your expanded asks. So that's part of the story that I think we need to do a better job of getting to our legislators. Sure. Sorry.
Okay.
That was a lot more
13
than 15
words.
words.
It was a lot more. I'm sorry.
You missed a couple zeros.
I have a certain level of passion about this because the property tax system has been broken
I was
for
actually
years.
timing you, so. Okay, any other question for these folks? You can escape the asylum now.
Thank you so
Thank you
much.
very much, guys. And I'm sure you'll be talking with Nancy or whomever. Okay. So now we're going to move into motions. I would entertain a motion
Are we all,
talked out.
Well, I was just going to ask on the,
Sure.
we have printed motions for us on paper already. And it says on the first one, under 7B, it says for operating, towards the end, for operating purposes and 1.6 and some change for payments to bond principals and interest. Is that annotated somewhere in the, can I find that?
Yes, you'll find the 1.6 million conversation on page 62.
Yep.
It's part of the general obligation bond fund. That money goes to pay for the debt service for the construction related to the Justice Center and the library.
Just so I don't have to look, again, when's that drop off? I know those, two of those have at a date.
27, I think.
I think it is I'm guessing, but I think it's 2028. Let me,
Won't be here.
Jeez.
June 2027 is the last payment for the Geo Bond Fund.
One of us won't.
That's it.
No.
So it's just a couple of years.
Yeah.
I'd like to raise, excuse me, I'd like to raise a question about the funding for the Pioneer Cemetery.
Is your microphone on?
No.
Yes, it is. I'm
Okay.
sorry. Let me pull it closer.
There we go.
I'd like to ask about the Pioneer Cemetery Fund. There's not enough money in here to do anything except mow the lawn. And there's a lot of those cemetery stones that have been broken, vandalized, and some of them have been moved to different places. I think it's a shame that we don't take care of that Pioneer Cemetery that has all of our founding fathers and mothers that founded this city that are buried there, and they're not, we're just not even showing them any respect at all. And $10,000 is not even close to what is needed. Is there any way we can raise that?
The Budget Committee can certainly make a recommendation to fund money out of the general fund. That's the only other place that you can get any resources. All of the other funds are going to be off the table for that. But the general fund, which by definition is, everything, the Budget Committee and ultimately the City Council can decide how you want to allocate that money. And you are certainly welcome to allocate you either reduce a budget in the general fund someplace by some amount to put it into the cemetery, or you would make a motion to take that out of general fund, ending fund balance, and put it into the proposed budget. You would have to name the amount where you want to get those appropriations. I would recommend that you hang on to that. I will tell you, the motions that are printed here are the required motions for the Budget Committee to make. So the Budget Committee has to recommend to the City Council how much tax rate to levy and how much to levy for debt service. That's the first motion under B. The second motion is basically saying, starting with the proposed budget as it's proposed, you recommend moving that forward, and then you take amendments to that. So if you wanted to fund the Pioneer Cemetery, $5,000 out of general fund balance, for example, once the motion is read and seconded, you would make a motion to amend to include $5,000 general fund money using fund balance for the Pioneer Cemetery. And then there would be a vote on that motion and any other amendments that would go through, whether you want to add things or take things out, whatever you want to put in or out. Then you get to, and you would vote on each amendment, and then you would get to voting on the final amended motion, if that makes sense.
Would this be done now or later?
It would be done after that second motion is read and seconded. So first do the first motion to levy taxes, and the tax rate, the 5.1364 is our maximum tax rate that we can do. The budget is built assuming you do that. Again, you don't have to levy the maximum tax rate. You can levy less than that. That would change the revenue projections, which would probably also change expenditure projections. You may not recommend levying more than that, but you're making that recommendation to City Council. If you reduced that levy rate when it gets to City Council, Council can't increase it. So you got to know that without like republishing the budget and doing a bunch of other things. But legally, this committee can make that recommendation.
So when you got any idea how much you think? I don't know how much it would take. I have no idea.
I was at a seminar this last 2 weeks ago, and he was talking about rebuilding a basic monument that had fallen down, one of these 6, 7 foot high. And it was about several $1,000s to do that. But I'm not saying that we need to do that everything, but I think on a yearly basis, we ought to be doing something rather than nothing. And that's,
Actually, I can speak on this a little bit. There's a couple groups coming together right now.
I know.
About the Pioneer Cemetery. My wife's is involved with that.
I'm supposed to be part of it, but I haven't been able to make the
Okay.
meetings.
So the way I understand it, and correct me if I'm wrong, 7A, we already passed that motion.
Yes.
So we can bring this up in regular session and approve it, can't we?
So
If the non-dedicated revenue from revenue sharing goes in general fund, can we appropriate it in a regular session?
So to be clear, what you have acted on is to say state revenue sharing is a general fund, non-dedicated revenue that is already built into the proposed budget.
Okay.
So when we're talking about the cemetery and appropriating money, you are talking about creating an appropriation that in the proposed budget does not exist.
I got you.
And you
Okay.
don't, you don't have to say what the revenue source is. You have to say you're either taking the appropriations from something else. And I'm going to pick on Kelly. So we're going to reduce the planning budget by $10,000 and put $10,000 into the Pioneer Cemetery because I love you.
So moved.
Or if you don't want to reduce that from someplace that is in the budget, you reduce it from the ending unappropriated fund balance. So where we currently say the ending fund balance is I don't even have the number right in front of me, is like $1.5 million. If you wanted to put $10,000 to the cemetery, we would go to $1.49 million of ending unappropriated fund balance, with that $10,000 going to the Pioneer Cemetery to do work. I will note from staff's perspective, we've provided information to the volunteer group that's working on the cemetery stuff. There are state grants that we can get, but to apply for those grants, we have to be able to say what we're going to do, who's going to do it, how much it's going to cost, and what is our matching. And that matching can include in-kind services, but without an organized group coming in saying, we will donate 100 hours of in-kind services, which we can then quantify for purposes of grant and get a match. We have not been able to apply for any of those grants. There are some that are historic preservation for cemeteries, some that could do parks, some additional work, but we're really looking for what the plan is that is being put forward. And we have nobody on staff who's like a historical headstone expert, who knows what would be necessary to restore them. The work that we do there is hand mowing. It's got to be hand weeding. We can't put out pesticides. We don't irrigate it because we know that there are burials where there are no headstones, and we don't wish to disturb the earth where that occurs. So we've been kind of stuck without a group that has said, here's what we're going to do. Here's the plan we wish to initiate to know what if anything, could be done. So that's what we've been waiting for, is to have that group come
Yeah,
together.
Appropriation be made anytime by us during the course after if you're taking it from the general fund, can't we do that at any time?
So once the budget is adopted in June, the only way that you would be able to create that appropriation would be to use general fund contingencies and transfer them to, for example, non-departmental, to make a grant to a group to put that together. That would still exist. And frankly, that exists today. You could ask to have that brought forward on the June agenda if there was going to be a June 2023 expenditure before the new fiscal year. But again, it's what's the plan and what's being asked for. And I've had nobody come in saying, I need XD dollars, this is what I would do with it.
So I think this is part of our history. It's something that we're kind of shooting in the dark here.
I think some of the other funds that are in here, though, are based on like donations that those groups receive. Like I look at the Police Special Revenue Fund, which is right next to the Pioneer Cemetery Fund, the Library Special Revenue Fund, the Senior Services Special Revenue Fund, and these all receive donations to help fund those special projects at the Senior Center, at the library, Shop with a Cop, et cetera, et cetera.
is there, is there not a group that does this for the Pioneer Cemetery?
It's in the formation.
Yeah, it's in the works right now. They're starting to come together. There's a couple personalities that reached out to my wife and started talking. So
I think that's the piece we're missing.
yeah,
Then, yeah, once that's.
they're bringing it together right now. I would submit that at this point, we probably leave it alone, let that group come together, formulate a plan and move on that way. Because I share your sentiment that it's you go down there, it's just like, really? But at this point, I think we need to let that group come together, do fundraising and try to receive donations, that kind of stuff, and then actually come up with a really good plan to address, because we've looked at, we've talked about fencing around it, improving trails, lighting, cameras. There's veterans there from Civil War, Spanish American War, and War of 1812. But there's not many cemeteries that have those unless you go to Arlington. So, maybe a flagpole, but that's still all pie in the sky type things right now. So I would submit that maybe we hold on with the current budget just for maintenance, let that group come together, get organized, and maybe revisit it next year.
I agree.
So I take it we're onto these motions.
Still waiting for a motion.
I'd like to make a motion. I move to recommend the City of Lebanon City Council levy the permanent property tax rate of 5.1364 per $1,000 of assessed value for operating purposes and $1,666,124 for payment of bond, principal, and interest.
We have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
We have a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Okay. Okay, we would entertain a second motion.
Before you do, if I might, so we discussed that certainly things kind of went through the process a little last minute. So what you have in front of you is actually that motion on the screen. This is what you
Different
got
number.
delivered on Friday. So either way, what was added was some contingencies in our utility funds at the last minute. And so this is the updated budget based on what you had in your documents delivered to you last week.
Well, I'd like to make a motion. I move to approve the fiscal year 2023, 2024 budget in the amount of $85,312,588 as proposed by the city's budget officer and recommend the City of Lebanon City Council adopt the fiscal year budget.
It's been moved,
Second.
seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Okay. We're going to look for one more
AJ.
motion.
You got one more, yeah. Is this a
what?
motion or is this an amendment to the previous motion
This,
that
this would
Counselor?
just be a motion because you're not changing the budget amount.
Okay, everybody listen carefully because I don't know if I got this right. I'd like to make a motion to direct staff to work with LDA to create a quarterly payment plan based on adherence to state and federal financial laws to fund the Main Street manager position with $30,000 of city-provided funds.
Second.
Thank you.
Been moved and seconded. Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. And with that, I'm going to close that hearing.
Good job with the gavel.
I damn near
Don't
broke
get
it.
used to it.
Left-handed.
Don't get
And
used
I'm
to
going
it.
to take a 10-minute break before we power through the rest of it. Let's all start talking again. Okay, we're going to adjourn as the City of Lebanon Budget Committee and reconvene as the Urban Renewal Agency Budget Committee. We just did. So, first one, FY 2023-2024 Lebanon Urban Renewal Agency Budget Presentation. That will be by Nancy and Brandon.
And I'm going to sum up for you because this is pretty straightforward. We do have 5 urban renewal districts. The budget is included here. In total, we are talking about total requirements, including appropriated contingencies and unappropriated ending balances of $5.5 million. Most of that is budgeted for debt service. We do have a piece that is budgeted for capital outlay basically in case we get an opportunity to address some of the projects remaining in an urban renewal district. These tend to be spurred by a need, raised by a private developer to do something. So we don't have a lot here. Pretty straightforward, but because we have the 5 districts, you do have to go in and out of public hearings. Have a motion. I'm going to note for the record, the only people remaining in the room are staff, and none of them intend to testify on any of the urban renewal districts. So I don't think we need to call for public comment and wait. I think we can just move forward, but Brandon and I would answer any questions you might have.
I have one. Nancy mentioned the Northwest Urban Renewal Tax will, that only has a few more years. I can't remember.
So we have debt service for the Northwest Urban Renewal District that lasts until 2032. That is 10 more years.
Okay, 10 more years of that. And then that money, that 959,000 or probably even more in 10 years will go into the general fund.
Well, it is returned to all of the taxing districts. So city, fire district, school district.
Right. So we'll get
County,
we'll get a large cut of
We'll
that.
get a large cut of that, more than 300,000 a year in revenue.
That's all. That was my only question.
Okay, and I will ask for public comment just to keep us legal.
Okay.
Okay, so I'm going to open the proposed urban renewal district taxes. Any public comment? Seeing none, I would entertain a motion.
I move to recommend the Urban Renewal Agency approve the Northwest Lebanon Urban Renewal District taxes for fiscal year 23-24 at the tax increment value of $959,488.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? I will close that motion, that hearing. And then we're going to open the Cheetah Lake URD hearing. Any public? No. Next, do I have a motion?
I move to recommend the Urban Renewal Agency approve the Cheetah Lake URD taxes for fiscal year 23-24 at the rate of 100% of the amount from the division of tax.
I have a motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
Do I have a second? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Closed? Open the Northwest Gateway URD. Do I have any public comment? No. Next, I'll take a motion. Third one.
It's your turn.
I move to recommend the Urban Renewal Agency approve the North Gateway Urban Renewal District taxes for federal year 23-24 at the rate of 100% of the amount from the division of tax.
I have a motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Closed? We're going to open the hearing for the downtown URD. Any public comment? Nothing? I'll accept a motion.
I move to recommend the Urban Renewal Agency approve the downtown URD taxes for fiscal year 23-24 at the rate of 100% of the amount from the division of tax.
Second.
I have a motion and it's seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Closed. I'll open the Mill Race URD hearing. Do I have a motion?
I move to recommend the Urban Renewal Agency approve the mill race URD taxes for fiscal year 2023-24 at the rate of 100% of the amount from the division of tax.
Second.
Moved and seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? We will close that one. And we're going to go to the proposed urban renewal budget. I'm looking for a motion.
I move to approve the Urban Renewal Agency fiscal year 23-24 budget in the sum of $4,720,888 as proposed by the agency's budget officer.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Second. All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? It passes. And I'm going to adjourn the Urban Renewal Agency Budget Committee and reconvene as the City of Lebanon Budget Committee. We're going to go to committee comments. Anything? I will. This is my 10th one of these for the City of Lebanon. 5th one that somehow I ended up as the chairman.
See if we can do it again for you next year.
I will kill you. I just want to say of all the budgets that I've had to read, starting with way back when John Hitt was the manager, and it was like playing Tetris
It was.
with your eyes closed. And it was, you couldn't figure out who hit John, and there was fund transfers for the darndest things, and everything was all over the map. This was, I sat down for a whole day to read this thing, and it took me an hour and a half, and I understood it. Then I sat down and read it again, and it took me an hour, and I understood it. So kudos for putting together something that makes a lot more sense and it's more user-friendly. And I hope that trend continues. And it's just such a pleasure after the ones we used to do to have this. Just yay.
I concur.
I'm glad I have that 4th grade education you're talking.
And I would thank you, and I would say Brandon and I both have additional improvements coming.
Well, you are a banker, so 4th grade's all you need. A little more notice than a week.
Yes, I apologize for that. We were changing things at the very last minute, clearly.
Clearly, as we saw it up on the board for the amendments, yeah. Next budget meeting, we don't need it.
We don't need that.
This will go to the city council next in June,
Right, June 14th.
June 14th. Are there any other comments